I call to order this meeting of the Issaquah School Board. Today is Thursday, March 9th. At this point, would everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Wonderful, thank you. The board has had a work study before this session. We will actually do a recap of that in a minute. So we will start tonight's meeting with public comment. I do have the set of people signed up for public comment. The majority of folks on the list are related to existing agenda items. So we'll hold calling for those comments until I get to the agenda items. But let me get started with some instructions on public comment. This is an opportunity for the board to receive public statements on items not listed on the meeting agenda. If you have a point of view for a specific agenda item, I ask that you hold it until I request comments during that particular agenda item. This public comment time is not intended as a time to raise issues unique to a particular student, staff member, or administrator. Rather, it's a time to provide your insights on issues more generally and of a wider concern. As a general rule, the board will not respond to public comment. I ask that you begin your comments by clearly stating your name, school attendance area. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes. We will use a timer. The board neither endorses nor censors any opinions expressed during public input. Please keep your comments civil and respectful and avoid personal attacks on others. The audience should refrain from making comments or engaging in applause. Please feel free to wave your hands in support of a speaker. So the first item I see on the list that is not on an agenda item, which will include discussions of both capital projects as well as our budget, is Larry White. So Larry White.
Larry White, Issaquah High School, essentially, is where my boys last attended. And you've probably seen me up here for the past several months talking about the issue of hate speech and about one slur in particular. For those of you that don't know, that's the slur. Okay? And I've asked these questions or brought it up and haven't seen any tangible results that I can tell from the district whatsoever. Okay? So I tried to do a little bit of research and looked in and found a situation back in October at Mercer Island where an anti-Semitic slur was used. Actually, it was used twice. And what the school district there did was they met with the local Jewish community leaders and came out with a unified statement to the community about hate speech being not permitted in the Mercer Island School District. So I start wondering to myself, well, what's the difference with Issaquah? And if I had brought up an anti-Semitic issue in Issaquah, would something have been done about it? Something tangible? Or if it was an attack on our LGBTQ plus community, would something have been done about it? If that's the case, what's the difference here? So at our town hall meeting back on January 10th, I brought up the issue of hate speech and it was a pretty spirited discussion. But no one could articulate what the district's hate speech policy was at that point in time. None of the people in this room. 2 days later, Superintendent Talyik came back and she did quote the policies and codes that are in place to deal with this matter. However, if it's taking the district and adults 2 days to come and answer, how do we expect the kids to know it? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone on the phone, Stephen? Thank you. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for sharing your point of view. We appreciate the comments we receive in meetings as well as in email. Now we will turn to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Thank you. The consent agenda is a meeting management tool whereby the board is able to pass multiple items in one motion. Consent agenda items have been reviewed by the board prior to the meeting. So with that, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any against? Okay, consent agenda passes. Okay, next we have the establishment of the regular agenda. Superintendent, are there any changes to the regular agenda?
There are no changes to the regular agenda.
Thank you. Okay, the next item that we have on our agenda is a report out. We have a series of times that the board has been together outside of board meetings in the past couple of weeks. And so we have some report outs or feedback. The first one is on our legislative conference. As a board, the board was together for 2 days in Olympia, February 26th, 27th for our annual Day on the Hill. This is an opportunity for us to share insights and any takeaways from that trip. And I'm going to ask you too, if you want to give input as well. We'll start with the board.
Oh, that's right. You weren't there. Well, first I want to start by thanking Director Gallinger for organizing our Day on the Hill and our time there, because we were able to speak to, well, almost most of our legislators while we were there. And so that was a really good opportunity. I think a highlight was having our students, so we do want to hear from you with us, because they were excellent representatives of the district in articulating challenges that we're facing. One of the ones we talked about a lot was special education funding and the impact on the district with the inadequate funding coming out of the federal and state governments. And so our students were very told impactful stories, and that worked well. We also had an opportunity to meet with Ross Hunter of DCYF related to our running of the Echo Glen education program. And I really appreciated, got the sense that they really appreciated the work that's been going on in the last, time, and really good changes occurring at Echo Glen, and a very, positive changes for our students that are there. My little bit.
Yeah, I too would like to thank Director Gallinger for all the work of organizing that. I'm grateful we were not impeded by snow. So that was great. And it was, for me, it was interesting hearing that really the conversations between the House and the Senate is where things need to happen. So even within the caucus, because the legislature is pretty much has, I think, almost a super majority at this point politically, so that the real conversations now are around the House and the Senate and how they differ, and that one might have a bill or changes to a bill, or basically coming out and saying, oh, that bill's going nowhere. And the person from the other chamber is like, I didn't know that. We've been pursuing as if this was almost a done deal. So I think really those conversations and being able to have relationships with all of our electeds really help us to be able to bring those messages and be that conduit of what's being said on one side, one chamber versus the other chamber. So I thought that was really interesting. And I am thankful that you also got a chance to squeeze in, so our students were able to meet the governor as well. So that was pretty awesome opportunity for them.
Okay. I thought it would be a good time for our students. Let's hear from our students on it. Do they have mics?
Then come up to the podium. And make sure you share your name and which school.
Okay, so I'm Paige Bryan. I'm the student rep from Issaquah High School. And I'm Sophia Kovlenko. I'm the student rep from Liberty High School. And we were given the opportunity to be able to go to the Day on the Hill event at the Capitol and represent our schools and our school district there, which was an incredible opportunity, something I've never done before. And I don't think Sophia has done before either. And we also went with another representative named Jordan, who couldn't be here today, but we all had an amazing experience there. Yeah, it really put into perspective how much has to happen for a change to occur. Like any change too, and how difficult it is to get those changes sometimes, and how much work our school board members have to go through to like voice those issues that directly impact us. So I was just really thankful to see how all of that works. Yeah, and we talked about two main topics. So we talked about school provided meals and special education, which the board mentioned before. And I think it was really important that senators and legislators were able to hear from the students directly, because we have our own personal stories that we wanted to share with them, obviously, that they haven't heard before because they're unique to us and unique to our situation in the school district. So, for example, I got to talk a lot about my experiences with special education funding, as I kind of fall under that category at school. And I think it was really impactful for them to be able to hear specifically about that from someone who's experiencing what's happening at the schools. And I think that overall made a huge impact on their ability to want to change things, or like their feelings about certain topics, which I think was super important.
Awesome. You guys did a great job. They learned how to advocate with legislators, which is amazing. Superintendent, would you like to add anything?
So this was also my first day on the Hill here, since there was a lot of COVID shutdowns in person over the prior years to me being in Issaquah. But I just want to say thank you so much to Paige and to Sophia and to Jordan for taking the time to spend with all of us and legislators. Right, I'm resonating. It's not. But in particular, what we were able to do, which I think was part of the learning experience, was we were all able to speak in between meetings and say, what did we learn? So Jordan, Paige, and Sophia were constantly adjusting based on what they had just previously learned in their engagement with our legislators. And we've got some pretty incredible legislators who are super excited to engage and do a lot to try and advocate for our community here at large. And I think that dialogue and that feedback and learning process just really showed to me a really strong exemplar of how this whole group worked together as well. So thank you.
Do you want to close with something?
Yeah, thank you everyone for all of your flexibility on days like that, where it was the first legislative day after fiscal cutoff. So they were all on the floor voting. And so it was hard to predict when they were going to be available to meet, but we did meet all of our 6 primary legislators that day. So I thought that was really great. And the students did do a great job. I was trying to see if you could make me a co-host. I was going to just share some photos, because Director Maraldo took some great pictures of our students, like with them on my cell phone. Yeah. Because I think that it's like, we don't, as elected officials, even get to sit at a table in Senator Wilma's office with her, hold court like you guys did. I was going to try and share that if I can figure out how to do that. We'll test our savvy like that. It's showing up so the board can see it. So it's little, but I just thought that was a really neat thing to see, like, oh wow, like it was a really highlight for me to see the opportunity that our students got to have with one of the most, certainly the most important legislator in K-12 education, but one of the most powerful elected politicians in our legislature. And, you know, you're in her office sitting with her. And there were just numerous examples of that day that I thought were really important. And I hope that we can continue that. I think that for me, it highlights that we have really good relationships with our legislators, that we can, you know, reach out to them and they're willing to give us their time, what little time they have. their lunch hour or whatever it is, meet with us. And that dialogue has continued, and we can talk about sort of where we are from a legislative standpoint near the end. So thank you guys.
Thank you. It was really a proud moment to watch those conversations and you advocating for what yourselves and what other kids needed in the system. I also learned, because we did watch about 12 votes in 13 minutes, that I need to use more gavel. There was a lot of there's a lot of gaveling happening. So more gavel we clearly need. Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. So next we next had the opportunity on March 1st, once we were back from Olympia, we did do a half-day board retreat. We covered another session with our student reps to get input on the program and how we need to enhance it as we launch for the next year and start to recruit, which will be happening soon, and make selections for our next round of student representatives. We did talk about strategic planning as well as a session on budget. So this is an opportunity for the board to talk about any key observations or takeaway from that session.
I can start on that one. And I am going to focus on the conversation we had with our student reps because they took a hard look at our GP12 and thought it could be improved. There were some aspects of the program itself that they wanted to tweak, and then there were just a number of our bullets that were kind of either unclear or redundant, or we knew what we meant, but they didn't know what we meant. So Andrea very graciously collected all of the input that they gathered. I have started to try to translate that into some changes to GP12. I'm going to work with Director Moraldo because some of it's kind of weird and fuzzy, and we're going to have to make some judgment calls and hope to bring that to the rest of the board on March 23rd. But I really appreciated all the insights from our students, as usual. They had a lot of good ideas that we hadn't thought of.
And then we spent part of our time getting an update on the budget. It was kind of a refinement of the information we've gotten and a little more in depth on where we think our, financial picture lands based on changing enrollment and changes in funding coming from the state, as well as additional expenditures or what things will cost us in addition to what we have going forward. And then we talked about the level of cuts that would probably be necessary as we move forward and our process to work through that. So that was a good presentation and discussion.
We also had time talking about the strategic planning, which really is a partnership work, but we have our strategy as a board is our ends. And so how do you actually look at strategizing which means by which you're going to accomplish the ends within the executive limitations, and how do you prioritize that? So I thought it was a good conversation to really talk about ultimately what is the board's vision, because we have a mission statement. It's a ends one that we've actually never monitored as far as I've been here for 14 years. But also what's our vision overall for students? So I thought those were really good conversations for the board to have, to be able to say, as you're doing the strategic planning work, that's important. I really appreciated being able to see all the community groups that have been talked to as we went through this strategic planning process, because it has to be the work of the community to help us prioritize. Because that's something I don't want to do in a vacuum. I want to make sure that we're representing community values. Because in the initial work was with the ends was really trying to decide what were the community values and how do we ensure we're pursuing them. And so then being able to say, as we're strategizing, and really it kind of feeds into the budget topic, how are we prioritizing what we're going to be spending money on to ensure that we still meet the ends, because we do have a world-class education system. And unfortunately, we have to continue to be making these cuts. But how do we do that in a thoughtful way with a strategy behind it to ensure that we don't lose the world-class education system that we have?
Yeah, I think that the strategic plan conversation is important for us to continue. I think that we need to really make sure that there is alignment between the work of the superintendent to implement her strategic plan and ensure that it aligns with the goals that are on our walls here. And I think we will get there. And I think that that is an important thing for us to really ensure that we have that really tight lockstep march forward to understand how we best can support superintendent and her team as they work towards implementation of this. So I look forward to further discussion and dialogue about how we drive for consensus to ensure that we have broad board support for that is in alignment with what we have here. I agree with Director Moraldo about, I think it's really important to be able to have a budget conversation that is not just about, so here are all the challenges and the limitations we have, but then how do we, aside from that, step back and look strategically about, does the budget as written or as proposed reflect our values and the board priorities? And I think that further conversations continue to highlight how it can be a yes and instead of an either or conversation, which has felt like it has been in the past couple years.
Either of you want to talk about the board retreat? Any comments? You can think about that and I'll ask superintendent if she has any thoughts to share. And if you want to, just go up. Okay.
I'll touch a little bit more upon this and reiterate some of the steps we're taking next on the strategic plan, but I just appreciated the discussion. Heard a lot of feedback across the whole time and really appreciated getting to work with our students to be able to talk about their role overall. So we are scheduling additional time in a work session on March 23rd to continue the dialogue and the connection, see that connection between the strategic plan and the ends and crosswalk that and look for connections and alignment. And we're in parallel continuing to see those connections also to the budget process, which we will talk about also later tonight.
Awesome. Do you want to add anything? So one of the pieces of feedback that we got in this session, you go ahead, was that the students weren't exactly sure when they could give their input. So I'm trying to be very specific about inviting them to give their input.
Okay.
You guys remember us, right?
We were gonna repeat our names. We were just up here. So we were able to, it was the Wednesday after the retreat, which was on Monday, or after our Day on the Hill, yeah, on Capitol Hill. We had the retreat on that Wednesday and it was in the morning before school. And we had like, I think it was 5 student rep members there. And we were able to talk a lot about what we wanted to see in the future, because a lot of us that are student representatives are seniors this year. And we're not going to be able to do like a second year term. And when we were at the Day on the Hill event, we met a lot of other student reps who were talking to us about their processes, because some schools and some districts have student representative organizations that have lasted for like 5 years, 10 years. So they're very organized in structure and they have a specific way of doing things. So I think that talking to them was really important because we were able to see kind of what other schools were doing and then give the board feedback based on what we thought would be good for future years, because this is the first year that they've done this like officially. So I don't blame them for any of the complaints that we had, but we did have some stuff specifically that we talked about, and we went into like kind of like breakout groups at different tables, and we each got to talk to like some of the board members and voice specific opinions about what we wanted to do or what we wanted to see next year.
Yeah, one of the big things that we did was I think there was one point of the GP12 that we didn't understand at all. So it was good, like diving into that, being able to get that explained to us. And I think that one is going to be like consolidated with a couple other ones. Also, I think one of the big things is that we need to have more advertising about this position because I think it's a really great opportunity for students to have as well. And I think a lot more student interest would come about if more students were aware of like how to do this and what this opportunity was and what it means to be on the school board as a student representative.
Yeah, my group talked a little bit about the recruiting process, like how we were gonna modify it to make it a little bit more inclusive, but also a little bit, I wanted to make it a little more strict. Just because of the way that we did it, they did a interview process, and then before they did the interview, they did like an application to try and narrow down who they wanted to interview. So I thought it would be really helpful to have student representatives from this year on that interview committee, just so that they could hear what their ideas were and like try and figure out who they thought would be best to like replace them. Because like I said, a lot of us are seniors and we're not going to be here next year. But also like the process of having like mentors and other students who are students on the board this year that would be able to help the incoming student representatives, because we came into this and we had no idea what we were doing and we were all just kind of trying to figure it out together. But I think that having more structure would make things go a little bit more smoothly in the future.
And the other big thing was we talked about having more regular check-ins with our representatives and having more of a mentor relationship where like a board member gets the student representative, like a couple of students assigned to them, and there's more correspondence that way, which I think would be really helpful because then they won't seem as intimidating when you first meet them, because adults are usually kind of intimidating.
Awesome.
That's pretty
Thank
much-
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And I will say too, from sitting in on those sessions, that it really, I think it's going to help us focus on our onboarding practice and the things that we really need to emphasize and the things that we thought we said, but somehow didn't get processed. So I think we're going to refine that a great deal, and I appreciate all your input.
Thank you.
And, one of the things that came up in ours, I was paired with Director Weaver, and we heard, hey, is there more times for us to get together in our region? So I escalated that to our WASDA executive director about having students invited to the regional meeting and create a joint networking dinner that we all start off the meeting with, and then we could split off into the student networking group and then doing our meeting. So they are looking in to see if Logan is available for that March 29th date at Shoreline or Shorewood High School. And if so, we'll let you guys know, but it'd be a great in-person opportunity to continue to meet with your King County colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you. So next, item to review was the session we had just prior to this board meeting. We had a work study session that was focused on capital projects. And so this is the opportunity for the board to give feedback or input on that session.
I'll go. Thank you for that work study session. That was really, really helpful. I know that your team has worked really hard at how do we more succinctly and transparently communicate what capital projects teams are doing. And in this inflationary environment where projects were budgeted for something in 2015, and now that they've come to completion, how much more that they've cost. I don't think it's a surprise to any of us who've lived or worked in this region over the past several years. But when you're doing building projects, it's really, really expensive. And for us to be able to see and show that and explain the whys behind it, I think it'll be really helpful for our community to understand everything that's been done from the 2016 and the projects that are still remaining.
I also think some of the clarity around the why. So what were some of the core issues that delayed us and what were the associated costs? Because I think it's about telling that story that when you have projects that were priced out in 2016 and you try to build in the middle of a pandemic or afterwards, just how that's going to impact the budget of those schools that are opening. And we tackled some really large projects within that bond. It was meant to be done over 8 years, but actually it was meant to be done in 4 years, and us getting those bonds over 8 years, or waiting 8 years for another bond. And I really think that it was hard for us to cost out how much things were going to be with so many of the delays of trying to build brand new projects with new land, new styles, it's not like the elementary schools where you go to some of the elementary schools, you can tell the ones that we got a layout and we just took that and clamped it on like 10 different school sites. You can't do that with a middle school that's built on 11 acres or building in a very steep hill, or a brand new elementary school where the last time we built it was several years ago and the costs are just different. And I think just trying to get permitting on brand new land also, I think, was a little bit more challenging for us. And tearing down a church or a religious college was not easy either.
And I appreciate the work that your team is doing to be able to give us deeper and richer information about the capital projects, so that we can more clearly see the starting estimates, the current budget, where it is in the process of the construction or permitting or whatever the phase is, and then the final cost associated with it. I know we sort of made a big ask in having it go back and get that information for all the projects in the 2016 bond, but I think it'll be very valuable to be able to pull that together and be able to tell the story. So thank you for all the work that was going into creating your layout of the information you're going to present.
Yeah, I would just like to echo that, because this is the kind of information that we've actually been asking for a while. And it's nice to see, the one pager that we got all the answers to all of our questions on a single sheet of paper for each project. So going forward, that's going to be hugely helpful.
I just want to acknowledge Martin Turney and Tom Mullins for their work to do that with significant support, obviously, from the rest of the business office, as well as from the communications team to think about how it all fits together. And we appreciated the feedback and we will map it out.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it'll be a step forward in transparency of information all in one place. We'll see an update of the website as well to capture that information, so it'll be available. So our next item, which we put it here because it's a continuation of the discussion of capital projects, is on the Issaquah High School stadium improvements and acceptance. What we'll do is I'll turn it over to you, Superintendent, and then we'll have an opportunity for input. Hold on, sorry. Shoot, let me finish my sentence, then I'll get the motion. That's after the sentence, Suzanne. I just want to make sure people understand that the order of things. So we'll do a district presentation, we'll have time for public input, and then we'll have some discussion. Yes, a motion, please.
Okay. I move the board approve final completion of the contract work for the Issaquah High School Stadium Improvements Project completed by Ski West Construction Company as of February 6th, 2023.
Second.
Superintendent.
Great. Tom Mullins is here to do a presentation about we've heard a lot in the community about the Issaquah High School stadium improvements. And so we're here to share an update by a presentation. This will get posted to the website after tonight.
Perfect. Tom Mullins with the Capital Projects Office here at the district. Just wanted to provide a quick overview. You can go to the next slide, Stevens. There you go. Tasked with providing an overview of the project and wanted to talk about the original scope of work, the original cost estimate, original timeline, permitting process and timeline, and the final scope of delivered and final cost. The original scope of work per the 2012 bond approved approval, it was to renovate the press box, increase home side seating to approximately 2,100, and increase visitor side seating to approximately 1,100. he's testing me. The visitor side seating, which is 400 with another a new 650 seat set of bleachers. And those bleachers will come with, we'll explain a little bit more about that. Just so you see, the calculation is allowed by the city code. Parking stalls required per seat in the stadium. 1 parking stall equals 3 seats. Number of parking stalls available for seat calculation. There's 725 parking stalls that they allowed us to calculate. That was a long process. They wouldn't let us use any of the gravel up towards the gun club or anything like that. So this, after all was said and done, the number of seats that was allowed by the city code would be 2,175. We ended up, when we get the visitor side in, the 2,175 allowed by code will have a total of 2,058. We'll have a delta of 117 seats that we haven't been able to, that we won't have in the stadium compared to how many we could have. Next slide. The scope of work that is completed to date, that's to renovate the press box. We replaced the existing press box. It was a single small cramped press box with 2 larger 2-space boxes with plenty of room for everybody. There's some new camera filming platforms. The home side stand improvements, we improved the ADA accommodations and accessibility. It was tough to get. We didn't have true accessibility up into the stands. And we replaced some existing failing side and front guardrails. That was completed this last fall, and that's the scope of work that we're looking at asking for the board to approve tonight. Next slide. Scope of work remaining, we're looking at the visitor side and stand improvements. Installing new visitor side stands includes ADA accommodations and accessibility, which again, we don't have that over there now. And the new stands would increase the visitor side seating. We're expecting that to be completed this fall. And again, visitor side stands would go from 400 to 650. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'm confused, because we just did a motion saying it's completed, but you're saying it's not going to be completed. till-
All the board is, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No.
Okay,
that was it.
all the board is approving is the completion of the Speed West portion of the bid portion of the project. This is going to be a separate piece. We always intended it to be separate. We kept it out as what we call an alternate type of a situation to make sure that if the bids came in too high, we could not do that portion, see where we end up at the end of the project. And it was very tight. So I chose not to do that portion of the project until now. Budget shaken out. We're almost complete with everything else. And we do have the budget to be able to put in the home or the visitor side stands now.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question to make sure I understood what you were telling me 4 slides ago is when we put this in the bond, we thought we were going to increase the total stadium capacity to 3,200. But when we started dealing with the city and the parking spaces, we determined that that was not feasible.
Not feasible exactly.
And we ended up at, I don't remember, 2075, something like that.
2175 is what they would allow us.
2175.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
And I even remember the discussions on the bond committee over this regarding the parking.
Yeah.
And they were trying to see if they could use a variety of things around the high school for parking to get it to count to be able to get to that number. So it's been known from the beginning that the parking was going to be one of the restrictions around the size of the stadium.
Absolutely.
And as much as, yes, it would be lovely to have more seating space because the number of students in the high school, what we really need is the 4th high school, which will reduce the number of students at Issaquah High School and make it a better match to the seating in the stadium.
Yes.
So a couple of questions. I think I know the answer to the first one. The reason we're not going up to the maximum 2175 seats that we can have, I'm assuming that's so you can bring in bleachers for when you need it and then not have the bleachers there to like the temporary ones, or?
We're looking at the original proposal was for those 650 seats at the time. We were going back and forth with the city and we wanted to come in under the number of seats. We did not want to push our luck and get up against the wall and find out that the city wouldn't approve it. We are looking actually, as we're going out for proposals, we're looking to add that extra seating onto the visitor side, get the extra, I think it's about 100 seats, but until we can get proposals and get that design done and make sure it'll fit. It's a pretty skinny area between the edge of the track and the fence for the baseball field behind it. So we'll have to go longer and it starts making a little less sense to go too wide.
Okay. And then my other question was the 125 parking slots. Does that include parking slots up at at Issaquah Middle?
Yep, the 725 includes Issaquah Middle, Issaquah High. We tried church, community center, street parking's an absolute no-no in that neighborhood, as we all know. And so that I think that helped the city be even more stringent in their interpretation of the code. Skyline, we were able to with a church across the street, sign an agreement with them, which the city of Sammamish approved to be able to say we can do more seating there than the number of parking spaces, as long as we have an agreement with the church for those.
So I know we have some folks signed up that wanted to do public comment. We may have more since then. So why don't we take this moment? Thank you, Tom. Why don't I move to public comment? Again, everything I said in the beginning about public comment holds true. First, begin your comments with clearly saying your name and attendance area. Limit your comments to 2 minutes, and all the factors of decorum hold true. So first up I have on this topic is Eric Shipley.
Hello, my name is Eric Shipley, and I've been a parent in the district since 2000. I was on the original bond, and I found the 2012 capital bond folder today as I was walking out of my house, which my wife kept and is astounding to me. So I actually have this. So I was on the original committee. I can tell you a few things. One, we didn't talk about specific numbers of the stadiums. That was not part of the content to my memory. We talked about dollars, and it was a discussion. It was very actually contentious about why each school should get so much, trying to base it on population, not on Friday night football attendance. It's interesting. We ended up, the numbers, IHS got 1.9 million, even though it was by far the oldest school, the oldest stadium. Liberty 4.8, Skyline 6.5 million was the original bond. 6.5, and it was very contentious. And part of that was because their stadium was dysfunctional, but they got a lot more than the other schools. It was not 11 million. So I have 3 questions for you today before you, in my opinion, don't approve this bond. Number one, why did Skyline get $11 million? 5 million more than the original. I can tell you the original bond committee would not have been pleased with that, nor with the structure that's currently built. It's way too large and was outside the bond. Number two, why was Issaquah High deprioritized 11, 12 years? Actually, in 2019, the district had sent out a communication that the bond was completed. And I actually raised my hand and said, no, you haven't completed it. You haven't done Issaquah High. It was almost like it was completely forgotten. And now you can see we didn't start working on this till 2020. What was it? 2020. Lastly, so I don't know why we were deprioritized. It became much more expensive, but the bond should have still been completed. This should have been done back in 2012. And one school that didn't receive enough funds from the beginning should not have received even less 10 years later. Lastly, we spent $1.9 million on the Issaquah High. The ADA improvements were never part of the bond. That should be done outside it. Number two, have you looked at did we spend $1.5 million on concrete? Honestly, the press box is reasonable, but how much money did we spend on concrete that was never part of the original bond? Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Next, we have Diana Goldberg.
Hi, everybody. My name is Diana Goldberg, and I live in the Issaquah High School district area. In the meetings over the past several years, we've heard a lot about looking at things through an equity lens. So let's look at the 2012 bond through an equity lens when it comes to buildings. Liberty High School, these numbers, by the way, are all from Issaquah's website, from the district's website. Liberty High School has a student population of 1,500. Grandstand capacity of 2,920, and full renovation, which was completed in 2015, including new field lights. Skyline High School has a student population of 2,200, grandstand capacity of 3,900, and a full renovation also completed in 2015, including new lights. Original cost, as Eric had mentioned, was $6.5 million. With an actual cost of $11.1 million. Issaquah High School, which is by far the largest high school population of the district at over 2,500, has 3 elementary schools that are Title I that feed into it, has a grandstand capacity that shrunk of under 1,400 based on the public records request schematic that I received today. It shows our capacity is 1,360 in our home stands. Work was started 10 years after the bond was passed, so it's not a big shock that costs went up, and included only one of the items that was originally put forward on the bond, which was the press box. The cost of the ADA ramp should not have been included in the bond funds, as this is a federal obligation of the school districts. The current lights that are on the field are so outdated that they are a safety hazard, and we strongly suspect they do not meet national standards. New LED lights would cut down the cost of the monthly bills and would increase safety concerns. Thank
for your
you.
input. Okay, it looks like the last one I have on this topic is Charlie Morton.
Hi, I'm Charlie Morton. I've been a district resident for 28 years. 3 kids have gone through district schools and my youngest is a sophomore at Issaquah High School. I'm also the club president of the Issaquah Lacrosse Board, and roughly 300 students and parents have their support to talk about our concerns related to Issaquah High School stadium improvements. We pay to use the district facilities, including the Issaquah High School. And I'm here to support the other speakers and encourage you to complete what I understand to be the original scope that was approved by voters in 2012 that included press box improvements, visitor and home stadium improvements. But most specifically, I'm concerned about the lighting improvements and sound improvements that were to be done. So I'll strongly encourage you to reconsider finishing the original project scope as I understood it to be. And I'll also add that if you want to see the state of the lights yourself, we have a home lacrosse game on Tuesday, March 28th. We'd appreciate your support, and you can see how perilous things are with those lights there at that stadium. So thank you.
Thank you for your input, and go Issaquah. Okay, thank you. Are there any additional comments on this agenda item in the room?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Any on Zoom, Stephen? Any student comment? Looks like we lost our one Issaquah High School student. Okay, board, any additional conversation? You guys jumped out on questions on me, so.
Yeah.
Any additional?
Oops, wait, don't need to turn that on for myself. Sorry, I got confused. Exactly. I also served on the 2012 bond committee. It was before I was elected to the school board. And there was a lot of discussion about the stadiums. I think what we also have to remember is that the need was different at each of the buildings. It wasn't so much as saying everybody had to get the same amount of money. It was about what did each of the buildings need for their improvements. And some needed more than others. Interestingly, the bond committee had increased the amount of money for the Issaquah High School stadium improvements to almost $3.5 million. And it was the decision of the board at the time to reduce it back to 1.9 million. So that actually would have given additional funding to do more work at Issaquah High School. But it was the decision of the board at that time not to do that. I think my recollection of what the bond committee had said they would do was exactly what Mr. Mullins just mentioned, which was increase the home side seating, increase the visitor seating, and put in the press box. I don't remember anything in there about for that specific line item related to the lighting or any other pieces to it. I think it is unfortunate that so much of it came down to the available parking, which was also discussed in the bond committee, because I kept pushing them to try to find more parking around surrounding both with the church or the transportation center or other parts that would allow us to have more seating. But that is a limitation that is coming from the city of Issaquah in that regard. And I don't know if Mr. Mullins had any, thoughts on when this project was, being discussed is exactly what would be done. The input from the school, in regard to, more being put into the press box versus increasing the home side seating. So I don't know if you guys had any information on how that was thought about at the school level and what they wanted out of the project.
So your question was, did the school have input as to the priority of what was done at the stadium when we started the project?
Yes.
We went into the project hoping to be able to do when we started the talks with the city, we went in with a design for the press box and to negotiate the amount of seating. At the time, we had a good idea that we weren't going to be able to do a lot with the home side stands because they're concrete and short of a structure on both ends that would hold up wings to add on width to the stadium. It would have very, very costly, type of thing to do. So we focused on the press box and then, like I said, the city brought up the accessibility is why that was part of the project and then on the visitor side stands. And then unfortunately, when we received bids, we were at probably one of the highest points in the market for construction. And we were taken back by the amount that it was. It went out to publicly bid. We had several bids. That was the lowest, was the one we took and proceeded with. Very low change order amount, very good contractor. But no, we didn't. We tried to do it all. And I'm not sure I don't know that the money that would be spent towards doing the visitor side bleachers would have done us any good on the home side stands. That's to touch that would have been a very, very expensive proposition. So my answer is no, we didn't, because we thought we kind of had our marching orders.
Before you walk away, can you explain why it wasn't until, I think you, in the presentation, it was 2020, why there was such a delay on something that was bonded in 2012?
I can only speculate that the problems with the parking were stalled negotiations. And I started in my position in 2019. I was told to make it a priority amongst a few other things. I made it a priority, got my team going. And so that was my foray into the project, was the start of 2019 when I put my team on it. And that's when we went through a lot of different iterations and finally got in officially to talk to the city in early 2020.
Director Weaver?
Okay, I can speak a little bit to the differences between Issaquah and Skyline. And there's no question that Skyline went over budget, so I'm not even going to go there. But there's several fundamental differences between Skyline and Issaquah. The first, as we've already talked about, is the parking issue, because Skyline's got the agreement with the church, so they didn't have that constraint. The second is, as Tom just said, Issaquah's got concrete home stands. Skyline stands were rickety, precarious. There was a definite safety need at Skyline to replace those stands, which wasn't really true at Issaquah. And then finally, the Skyline Stadium is a significant distance away from the rest of the building. So it needed to have the infrastructure of changing rooms and bathrooms. And I'm not sure what all else is in there, but that needed to be part of the stadium. Whereas Issaquah Stadium is right next to the building as it was rebuilt. So they didn't have those same issues. So yes, that project went over budget, but there were significant differences that caused more money to be spent at Skyline. I can't really speak to Liberty. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite sure. I mean, Liberty almost didn't get the horseshoe side with the concession stands. There were amenities that Liberty didn't have that the other schools did have. And so I think that was some changes there as far as being able to do concessions, and all of that wasn't there. Also, working with the county wasn't nearly as hard as working with the cities, because there is a ton of street parking that I think is allowed to be counted at Liberty, which is why you have the ability to have that many students there, is because the street parking is allowed. But I will say that going back to recollections of 2012, we were concerned. This was the largest bond that the district had ever gone for. We were asking, what was it, 216 or 219 million? And it was huge compared to anything we'd done before. There was a lot of concerns that it wouldn't pass. And so there were board members, it was a lot of negotiating just to get them to say yes to having stadiums on there at all. And so I think that again, we can't go back in history, and that's why I wanted to find out from Director Mullins what the issues were with the delay, because that's been a baffling thing. I'm like, you're right, we're not done with 2012 bond items. What's going on here? And so, but you can see the difficulty if he started his team back up in 2019 and we still haven't gotten the visitor side. It is difficult working with the particular city that school is in. And we've seen that on and on and on. And I appreciate even the work of the board members recently who have been meeting with leadership from the city along with the superintendent, because we've got to fix some of that. It's costing our taxpayers a fortune in delays with the cities taking so long to give us things. And one city in particular, which costs taxpayers in Newcastle and taxpayers in Renton and taxpayers in unincorporated King County and taxpayers in Sammamish that have no right to vote for the city council that is costing them all this money.
So before we move to a vote on this particular item, I'll just note that Director Gallinger had to step away, so there will only be 4 of us for this vote. He will rejoin us in a little bit. So we have a motion on the floor. Thank you for that discussion. I'll now move to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Seeing none, it passes. Thank you. So next we will move to student input on the treatment of people. Do you have student input, Sophia? Awesome. Next, we'll have student rep for input on EL2, which is treatment of people. And introduce yourself again, since it's a new section. And then we'd love to hear your input.
Okay, so my name is Sophia Kovalenko from Liberty High School, and my EL, as was mentioned, was EL number 2, which is the treatment of people. So to collect student input for this, I got the librarian to help me send out a quiz, like a survey with different points of this EL. And one big piece of feedback that I have is that 52% of the people that took this quiz noted that the school fails to properly address complaints. And I had a free response portion in the survey. So a lot of people specifically listed their complaints that I will now address to you. Or I will relay them. So one big thing is that a lot of students, specifically underclassmen, have been noticing a lot more racism, particularly towards African American students. And this includes racist comments and slurs being used against them without repercussions from the teachers. Also, Liberty has, students have said that there's a lot of violence that they see within the student body. And one student mentioned that Liberty High School doesn't provide a safe environment for students and continues to allow students who post selfies with guns and videos of violence against other students on campus and enrolled in classes. I have had issues and complaints on multiple occasions over the last 2 years, and there seems to be no action taken and no follow-up with me as far as what's going on. So that's a pretty scary one. A lot of female students have been complaining about feeling uncomfortable due to the behavior of male students around them, specifically in PE classes. One student shared that in my PE class last semester, there was a group of boys who would routinely make rape jokes and nothing was ever really done about it, even after I informed the teacher. In my current PE class, there is a student who is special ed and a junior in freshman PE, and he makes many girls feel uncomfortable and touches them and makes comments about them, and the boys in the class just encourage his behavior. So these students have also complained about the dumb blonde stereotype that has been used to make fun of them by students and teachers in the classroom. Another new big problem at our school is that 2 of our 5 bathrooms were closed because there was some writing on the walls. And this creates kind of a problem because they're both in the same section of the school, like in the right wing. So now nobody has access to the bathrooms unless they walk all the way across to the other side of the school from those classrooms. And I timed it, and it takes about 12 minutes to go to the bathroom if you're coming from the gym. And if you're going from the portables, it's 15 to 20 minutes, which is almost half of the whole period, which is a lot of class time to miss just to go to the bathroom. And since there's less bathrooms available total, they're really packed during passing time. So it's hard to go unless like it's during class. And yeah, so that's a big complaint that a lot of students have. And then another big thing is that students are complaining about not receiving adequate help from the teachers that they ask for. And this includes 504 plans and IEPs getting ignored or overlooked. And also students that didn't meet requirements to pass a class getting moved on to the next class. One student specifically said, I'm still trying to figure out why a student that didn't pass the second half of Algebra 1 is moved on to geometry. Algebra is key to getting through geometry, but students are just jammed ahead to meet quotas and schedules. I'm still trying to figure out if geometry is even required to receive a high school diploma, and hopefully the counselor will return my calls at some point. It definitely feels that the schools would rather move the students along through the system and continue collecting federal and state dollars for meeting quotas than actually help the students that are behind get caught up and stay on track. And finally, there are transgender students at our school that don't feel seen by some of the teachers because they have been asking the teachers to use specific pronouns for them. And a lot of teachers are very good about this and they respect it and they follow through. But a lot of teachers also ignore their requests, and the students reported that it makes them feel unseen and disrespected because the teachers definitely know what they prefer to be addressed as because they've stated it explicitly, and still they continue to go against the preferences and do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sophia. So the input will definitely be leveraged as we go to look forward at monitoring the actual ELs as we go forward. And so it's great to have that input of the actual student experience. Next, we will move on, Superintendent, to works in progress. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. I'll keep it short because in addition to the budgeting process, which we'll hear a presentation on and have some discussion on, the other largest project that we are working on across the district is on strategic plan. So we did complete a community listening session last week. We're continuing engagement across the district and the community for students, community groups, and our staff. And we are preparing and collecting feedback through a thought exchange on the board's current draft of a vision. And the goal is that that would be considered and approved by the board at the March 23rd meeting. And that thought exchange, as a reminder, will be open until March 15th. And then ongoing, we are continuing, as I mentioned earlier, in conjunction with the board retreat debrief to develop a plan and conduct a work study where we talk a little bit more about the connections between the strategic plan and the ends and the ELs, as well as get further input and make sure that there is a whole group discussion across the board, and it's an opportunity to consider those deeper connections and provide feedback to make it stronger.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, so now we will move forward to our next agenda item, which is on budget. This is the next installment, ongoing set of discussions we've been having in preparation for the budget for the 23-24 school year. Following the presentation from the administration, there will be an opportunity for public input prior to board discussion. Superintendent, over to you.
Great, thank you. So Martin Turney will be leading this presentation. And I just want to thank Martin for being at the helm during this time where we are engaging in many more discussions with many different constituent groups and our entire cabinet for also engaging very deeply on our budget discussion as we prepare for these public meetings where there's board discussion as a group and a whole, and that invites additional next steps as we move forward and in accordance with the budget development guideline timeline that we set forward earlier at a board meeting. So I want to just say thank you to everyone for a lot of hard work and focus and attention here. So I'll pass it over to Martin to kick us off and lead off from there.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent. Again, Martin Turney, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you for being here to listen to the update tonight. I have a lot of information, so I wanted to get right into it. Clicker works, thank goodness. Okay, good. So just quickly on the purpose, and I want to preface also some folks aren't as familiar with how school finance works. So we are talking about the general fund, and that's our operating fund that we rely on year to year to pay for those things that we need to do the business of the district. So today we want to review updated budget inputs and financial conditions, share some next level detail on the 23-24 budget, and discuss key questions to inform next level work on the budget proposal. I also wanted to note some key things here. We have to reduce our budget to meet our financial obligations. We need to right size and course correct. That is something that we know. And this has been as part of a multi-year plan. Our resources are finite. We have to make choices and we invite you to share your ideas, and we've had opportunity for people to share their ideas along the way. We will also invest, make room for what is normal as we shift our work to focus on key areas in the strategic plan, which will mean we stop, reduce in some ways, and we also invite input on that. So I briefly touched on this, but I wanted to remind folks that we have been going through input and engagement sessions. We've had, as you mentioned, board retreats, work sessions. We've had community listening sessions. We have met with administrators, had principal meetings of sectionals, county meetings, so a variety of different opportunities to share information and take in input from various groups. This is actually, I appreciate everyone who's taken part of that because it's helped us. It's helped us as we work through the specifics of the budget and the things we need to think about as we try to put this together. As a reminder, enrollment is an important piece of the equation. And we are looking at declining enrollment. We're projecting slightly down for next year, and a likelihood that in at least the 2 to 5 years, we may see some slight declines or leveling off. So that impacts our revenue. As class cohorts continue to be smaller, they progress through the system and they keep the population down. And enrollment drives revenue, right? So that's a very important piece of this. As we see that decline and leveling off, it has an impact on our revenue and the resources we have to run the district. So just a brief slide on, you can see the trend in the next couple of years. I put 23, 24, 24, 25 projected as of January, this slide. We started our conversations with the budget very early on. And when you do that, you have a lot less knowns. So you have uncertainty. And as you progress through the process, some of those things that you've potentially not known or needed to have a conservative approach on become more clear, and you have more information that you can rely on. And so there are a couple of key inputs here that I wanted to highlight that we have more information on. So we've received our most recent March enrollment counts, and those counts were up again. So that helps because we are funded on an average for the year. Being at this point in the year and having the numbers that we have gives us confidence in that increased amount of revenue that we can count on and factor into our ending fund balance. So that is about $2.5 million that would be added to our projection to ending fund balance for this year. So that pushes us in that direction. Additionally, we had some unexpected state funding for transportation. This is interesting. We get numbers early on in the budgeting process, and in this case, we've we've had an uptick. So transportation has been one of those areas that's been difficult for us to predict. There's a funding formula through the state that is sometimes very difficult for us to understand. And quite frankly, when we enlist help from OSPI, it's hard for them to explain it as well. So, but what I want to point out here is that we want to adjust our projections as we have more information, because that has an impact on what we're looking at as a reduction number. And so we want to factor that in we want to factor that in real time so that we can take that into account. This results in a 1.53% increase. That's of the total budget. I should have mentioned that. And it brings our original projection, and you may have seen this in earlier conversations, that it was at 28 million, brings it up to 33.7. This simply shows that. I've shown this at a few different input sessions, and most recently the community listening session, where the number had been for 22-23 at 28 million. This is now revised, and it shows the consequence of what it would look like in 23-24, the budget year that we're looking at. Now, what's important there is that we're still on a downward trajectory, and we're still in a place where the percentage needs to be addressed. So it does not eliminate our issue, but it does change the what we expect to be the ending there. So again, that's up now, updated per what we know. We have some key pieces of information, updates that we can share at this moment in the process. Given what I've just shared about our anticipated ending fund balance for this year, we believe the anticipated needed reduction for 23-24, that target is just under $10 million. So that number has changed, and it has changed because of the factors that we've just talked about. Important there as well is that at this point, we do not anticipate needing to take action on a reduction in force for certificated staff. So that is one thing that we do not anticipate needing to do in this budget cycle. You know, some folks may have heard what other neighboring districts are having to do to address their issues. So I wanted to point out that we know school closures or boundary changes coming into next year. So I just wanted to clarify that in case that was a question on anyone's mind. We want to point out that some roles and work will be reduced, rescoped, or restructured because, of course, we still have reductions to make. We still have things that we need to address. We also have additional investments to be added to meet the needs of the system and to support those strategic plan priority areas, which are very important to us as a system going forward.
So Martin, the 10 million is before that last bullet, right?
Correct. That's
So
correct.
to the extent that we need money for the last bullet, the 10 million goes up, or the
Well,
total need goes up.
yes, and I actually, why don't we maybe pin that, because I may have a way to explain where I'm going with that later on in the slides. So that doesn't mean that we don't have unknowns still, right? We have things such as our safety net. This is a application process the district goes through to apply for funding from the state that is an unknown until we receive it. So we have to go through an application process. I want to thank Special Services for all the work that goes into that. There's a lot. We can't count on it necessarily. We have an idea when we try to budget for this. And sometimes, especially when you have a team such as ours who is able to find and go through that process and increase the amount of our application, we may be in a situation where we have additional revenue at the end of the year, and this comes to us in August. So that would be a late influx of revenue. So those are things we won't know at this point. Obviously, there's some legislative outcomes that we don't know for sure. We're starting to get a little bit more clarity as we go through. Those obviously impact our 23-24 budget assumptions. One of them being the inflationary salary increase and what that means to us locally, because when there is an increase, it costs us something locally to fund those increases. And what the funding model, that prototypical bottom might look like at the end of the day. and those things drive what we get in apportionment every year. Okay. Again, enrollment equaling revenue. We won't know what the 23-24 enrollment is actually going to look like until we get there. Right. So what we do is we do our best projections early on, and then we wait and see. One thing we do is we try to build in some capacity for increased enrollment so that we can address class size and those things as we need to, if we are in that situation. And of course, as things have cost more in the world in general, we don't know if there's going to be a continued increase in things like material supplies and other operating costs, fuel, utilities, insurance, et cetera. This was a reminder slide about when we've talked about reductions and approached them as a system. We have utilized all available mechanisms. So we've tried to look at this from all different ways and utilize everything that we have at our disposal. Managing through staff attrition if possible, consolidation and restructuring of work, reducing our consultant and service providers contracts there. Using other funding sources as feasible and allowable. If there's a way to do it, we're looking to do that. Things like suspension of costs such as travel and potentially contractual management rights for staff reduction. When it comes to reductions, these estimated reductions are at every level of the district. And they will result in team members having to stop or reduce some work. That is just a consequence of having to make reductions. So a quick certificated staff update. At the end of February, we had 61 confirmed retirements or resignations or leave replacement contracts. This represents 4.5% of total certificated staff. Amount anticipated to increase. So this is anticipated to go up toward the end of the school year. We're still early on, so obviously there's time for that to increase. And level of attrition is expected to be adequate for the necessary reduction in this area. And I can explain a little bit about that in just a second. Getting into some of the details of the estimated proposed reductions, we have put it into a couple of different categories, starting with central administration and operations. So going through the process, we identified in unrepresented staff units about $2.3 million, 15 FTE. Represented 1.5 million and 10 FTE. So these are estimated and proposed reductions at the central administration and operations level. We did note that historically we have had a low percentage compared to our cohort in King County of administration, and this would continue that trend going forward. Additionally, at the central administration and operations level, there are other things that are not related to staff. Those are all our supplies, materials, those kind of things. We have identified through many conversations and a lot of work with departments and the individuals in those departments where we may be able to take those savings. So we've estimated some cost savings in each of these general categories: software, contractual services, supplies and equipment, travel, and some subscriptions. So what we're showing you there is that estimated amount per category. So in addition to the central administration operations, the kind of second category of consideration here are reductions that would impact school budgets and staff. We've identified 5 to 10% reduction to annual discretionary allocations to buildings. Buildings get a certain amount assigned per enrollment every year. This would be to the new year allocation of 5 to 10% reduction there, and it would not be applied to the carryover. School buildings are allowed to carry over funds to the next year as a way of managing their own discretionary budget. With a projected declining enrollment of about 200 students, we have some right sizing to do there. And so identified about 10 FTE expected, and referring to the earlier slide, we believe that can be accomplished through attrition. Again, this is about right sizing and is expected to maintain those current class staffing ratios. So again, about right sizing to what we expect the student population to be. In addition, an adjustment to administration staffing at high schools. And that is the amount of about $162,000. So I wanted to sum these up and give you kind of the roll up here of what that looks like, estimated reductions. So those total reductions, like I mentioned before, just under $10 million. That's about 2.63% of our existing current year budget. And those broken out areas that we just talked about, central administration operations would be about 81% of those reductions. Lumping the budget together for that category and looking at the identified total reductions of about $7.9 million, that's about 8.2% of that budget reduction. Talking about school budgets and staff, that's the remaining 19% of the total reduction. Applying that to the total amount of their budgets, about 0.7% of that school budget and staff amount. So this slide shows where those reductions will be taken in the system if you look at it in these two general categories. Now I want to start talking about some of the strategic areas of focus. I'm not sure if you want to mention anything about this slide, or we can continue to some of the details.
It's a reminder slide, but that we've seen, so we can move forward.
So we wanted to call out one important area here, support for mental and behavioral health. And when we talk about investments or additions going into a new budget year, we have identified additional positions to work directly with students and staff across all tiers, aligned to multi-tiered systems of support. And that estimated additional staff would be about 16 FTE. And that would be achieved partially by restructuring our contracted mental health services. So this is a relook at how we do things and trying to do things in a way that we believe would accomplish what's important for our students. So these strategic plan priority areas, and these would be additions in the budget. Again, we just talked about the 16 FTE for the support for mental and behavioral health. We have the other priority areas. We showed you the quick slide there of a recap. What's included in that is 7 FTE and about $1.4 million in materials and supplies. Altogether, that is approximately 1% of the anticipated budget for 23-24, just to give you some context. And so on this slide, and I'm kind of coming back to where you were with the question you had earlier, is that we believe that we need to enact the reductions of just under $10 million in the 23-24 budget, right? This addresses our need to make reductions to maintain the fund balance and where it needs to be. We would suggest creating capacity for the strategic areas of focus in that amount of $4 million and utilize this capacity dependent on financial conditions. So as we learn more from the legislature, if we have increased enrollment, those things that provide additional capacity in our budget, that we utilize it strategically in that way. Of course, I should also mention that we would have to manage the budget if things came out in another way where we needed to decrease our funding, or excuse me, our spending. And this is something that we always do in any budget year to make sure that we maintain where we need to be in relation to our fund balance. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that was my attempt to kind of to get to the answer there.
Yeah, I'm not sure it did because, okay, we have 9.7 million that we've identified in reductions.
Right.
And that goes back to your target of 10 million. But then we want to create capacity for 4 million. Where does that 4 million come from?
So we would build into the budget. So similar to how we build capacity for additional teachers, FTE, if we have increased enrollment. So we have that built in as capacity if we need to use it. So we know we have increased enrollment, we tap into that and we use it accordingly.
Okay, so we're creating capacity in the budget, but we're not necessarily creating the dollars. We're waiting to see where enrollment breaks out.
So, and one important thing is where our inflationary increase, let's say once we know what the legislature is going to come out with and for the inflationary increase for staff, that may free up some budget capacity that we can apply toward this mission.
Which was your page of unknowns, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we haven't really created the 4 million. We're just kind of hoping for the best case.
And then it becomes a management objective.
I think, well, let me say it in my words. What we're saying is we're presupposing priorities, and as funding comes in, if any of those unknowns come into the positive, we would start applying it to our stated priorities. So we may not get through the full list of the 4 million if those unknowns come back at 2.5 million, but that would still be the bucket of priorities. We would go fund with it.
Correct. That's a great way to say it.
So why don't we do this before we go to, that was fantastic, thank you. Why don't we go to public input? I know I have some on the page. And we'll go to board discussion after that. So here that signed up, I have 3 names that I believe fit this topic. First was Laura Meserol. Hopefully I said that correctly. Again, please say your name and your attendance area. You'll have 2 minutes and all of the items of decorum I've mentioned apply.
Hello, board and superintendent. I am Laura Meserol. I'm a counselor at Pacific Cascade Middle School. I also have a son at Creekside, and I've coached at Issaquah, and I'm an alum. I have worked in the district for 11 years with 8 years at PCMS, and my first 3 years split between Newcastle and Maple Hills. And I'd like to start, as we face another year of difficult budget decisions, to say thank you for prioritizing our students' mental health over these past few years. I can't imagine that job, and we're super grateful for what you have done so far. 2 years ago, a budget proposal came forward to reduce elementary school counselors to part-time, and I'm especially grateful for your action to restore them to full-time. As one of a handful of counselors still left in the district who had to split buildings, I can tell you it is quite a juggling act to support 2 buildings with 2 sets of students, staff, families, 504s, class lessons, staff meetings, admin, and all the pieces that go in with that. And quite frankly, after COVID, that job would not have been sustainable and part-time in 2 buildings. There's no way. So thank you for that. Across all levels, it's also no secret that we continue to see high needs of mental health concerns around anxiety, depression, and especially social difficulties. We are also impacted, students have also been impacted by the loss of the 3rd middle school counselors, PBSES coaches, deans, and EPs across the different levels. These losses translate into fewer resources to support high-level needs on a consistent and ongoing basis, more limited availability for all students to access school counselor support, and significant challenges to implementing Tier 2 interventions. As counselors, we're doing our best by providing individual counseling, and we're in small groups, skill-based small groups, and we rely heavily on our Swedish mental health counselors to provide on-site therapy and connection to the community. Thank you for your mental health support for our students.
Thank you for your input. Next, I have Camille Wright.
Good evening. My name is Camille Wright, and I currently work at Maywood Middle School. I have 3 boys. My 2 older boys have gone through Maywood and have gone through Liberty, and my youngest has gone through Maywood and now is at Liberty as well. I am also the union rep at my building, and my athletic department has come to me very concerned with a rumor going around the district that middle school sports may potentially be cut due to our budget cuts. I'm here to speak on this and on behalf of my building's athletic department and coaches. My athletic director has written this for me to read for you. It feels strange to think of the possibility of no schools after school dribbling, shooting, serving, hitting, throwing, or running. Our middle school athletics programs are highly anticipated each year and have hundreds of students participants. Students in our sports programs are learning athletic skills, teamwork, discipline, physical activity, grit, determination, being a good team player, camaraderie, how to win, how to lose, and how to work through difficulties. In an era where we are focusing on student involvement at school, as well as teaching the whole child, not offering middle school sports programs seems like the district is heading in the wrong way. We realize the amount of funds that are required to run middle school athletics is large. However, we also believe that those students involved in middle school athletics are worth that funding. The amount of involvement, pride, skill building, self-esteem, and life lessons that student athletes acquire each season far outweighs the financial cost. Hopefully, you're looking at alternatives if this is an issue that you are thinking about cutting from the budget. At Maywood, currently, it is projected that at least 600 of our students will be in the sports programs this year. Some of them are repeated sports. So I projected that at least half of our school is in a sports activity. We'd like to know what you would be doing for these students if those programs are not available. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. It sounds like you want to say.
So in general, I know we don't respond to that, but at some point tonight, I'm going to want the answer to that question.
It was not in any place in the presentation that we just saw. So it is not in our discussion. I can just say that. We just went through the whole presentation. Okay, one more. Rachel? Offland? How did I do? Where?
Good evening, Superintendent, School Board members, and Ms. Gambari. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Rachel Offant, and I'm happy to be back in ISD as a counselor at Issaquah High School. I previously was at Beaver Lake, but lost my position when we went from 3 counselors to 2 counselors. I also have 3 students in the Issaquah School District. I believe one of the most important aspects of my job is to advocate for the needs of students and to continuously shine a spotlight on the mental health needs of our youth. Although our district and students continue to have needs that exceed the services we can provide as school counselors on a daily basis, I also understand the financial limitations, concerns, and seriousness of the budget crisis in our district. So instead of asking for more support for our counseling departments, which don't get me wrong, I would love to do, I'm actually here to say a heartfelt thank you. Thank you for fighting to retain our elementary counselors at 1.0 FTE per building during last year's budget cuts. As a high school counselor, I truly appreciate and value the important work that my colleagues do at the elementary and middle school levels to help our students build social and emotional skills to cope with challenges in access learning. Strong mental health during these early years means that our students can reach appropriate developmental and emotional milestones, and this earliest intervention and prevention foundation has compounding effects on students' success in high school and beyond. Thank you also for your commitment to the public to utilize levy funds to support mental health and keep this a priority in our district. Please don't mistake my gratitude for thinking that we're operating at a level where we are able to provide school counseling services that meet all the needs of our students. But instead, I want to acknowledge that you have tough decisions to make and nothing is taken lightly. With that in mind, thank you for continuing to fight to ensure that budgets are sustained, especially in our central admin, student interventions, and support programs. These are critically important in providing alignment, oversight, collaboration, and compliance for our 47 school counselors in 27 buildings. In our buildings, we are operating our school counseling, PPS, graduation specialists, and building admin teams at the absolute barest bones level, working at and beyond capacity, but we love this work deeply. I just want to thank you for your service to our district and for your commitment to our students and for keeping this a priority.
Thank you for your input. Is there any more input in the room on this item? Any on the phone or Zoom? Zoom, Stephen? No. Thank you. I will turn it over to the board for discussion.
I'll just then ask the question, is there any truth to the rumor about middle school sports being in consideration? Because I would want to know the answer to that myself, because I actually believe that, you know, one thing that resonated with me is when you had the consultants for the strategic planning say, one of the things that they heard consistently from middle school students is, why don't we have boys soccer in middle school? So I actually think we need to offer more at our middle schools, and specifically boys soccer. So if we're going to ask for feedback from our students in our community, then unless there's a compelling reason not to, if we have to toggle the dial of the final forms of the cost that's all come through our district as far as the pay to play, then so be it, in order to be able to leverage additional activities and athletics for our students and do it at the level it needs to be, so that families who can't afford it can be covered as well. So I mean, we can do this equitably, but yes, so I would like to know the answer to that question.
I'm surprised to hear that as a rumor, because we haven't engaged in conversation in a way that would, that's surprising to me when I hear that feedback from others. But I sit in a different space than you sit every day. So that is helpful feedback to know. We are still working through, we've been focusing very much on the personnel side because of the role that that plays in the timeline and the communication. So we wanted to make sure that we talked about that very openly today. We are aware that middle school is a high needs area for continued investment, not only in terms of ensuring, I know we've had conversations around ensuring that we have coaches, right, and the right people to be in front of kids to coach. We are also working with partners in the community in Issaquah in particular to think about how we can partner with the recreations department. A lot of it's not just about sports, but it's also giving our middle school students an opportunity after school to engage and explore different activities. So that would feel inconsistent with our focus on helping to address student activity and athletics at the middle school level.
So the short answer.
So the short answer is no, that's not currently being explored. Thank you. But I wanted to give some more rationale and to share some updates about what we're also doing to expand opportunity. Thank you.
Perfect. But that short answer is really important for us to hear. And
yes, that's why I was going to do it.
yeah.
Director Moralto.
Well, and to that end, are we struggling to get coaches? Are there some programs, some athletic programs that may not be happening at the middle school because we don't have staffing for it, rather than, because I could see how that would then rumor in, oh, that staffing must have been cut. Oh, that mean board cut our athletic programs.
There has been some challenges. We were surfaced at one of our discussions on middle school athletics, getting folks to coach and has been a challenge, but I do feel confident that with where people are in their lives, that we will hopefully see an uptick on that. And I know that Sherry Cox and others across the buildings, I get postings all the time, reminder, spread the word. So I'm confident that we will continue to work hard at that.
And there was some advertising. So I know I saw that requesting community or parent coaching opportunities as well. So that did go out, I think, after our last conversation to cast a wider net as well. Other comments or questions? CFO attorney, you probably want to come back up, I think.
Sure. I just want to acknowledge the work that the superintendent and her team has done. I really appreciate the presentation tonight. I think being forthright at March 9th and to be able to provide that assurance to staff was a really important, strong message to send. I think the thoughtful approach to how you plan to navigate us through this environment and to really focus on operational efficiency and highlight that you're doing everything in your power to keep it restricted to firewall away from impact to students and classroom teachers. I really, really appreciate. I think your approach of having this focus on the strategic areas of need and to say, hey, we will do this as long as we have the budget capacity to, based on what we hope for from legislative action or formula changes like to transportation, whatever the thing could be. I really like that approach. And I think that being able to map that out for the community and for our staff of greater than 2,000 staff is really helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate too this iterative process, right? You started with what you knew when we started these budget discussions, and you have been refining it along the way. And I'm becoming more optimistic because I'm very pleased with what you've been able to present today in regards to where the cuts will actually ultimately be taking place, and keeping that furthest away from our students in the classroom. And yeah, I'm actually very hopeful that we're able to implement some of the investments that we're discussing, because I think that will be some key things that will help our system move forward and improve outcomes for students.
And I would say, looking specifically at the slide around support for mental health and behavioral health. So realizing that sometimes you might restructure what we're doing there, but my anticipation is that the level of service, the level of professionalism will be the same. It's much like going from SROs to SSOs, where having those more in-house might be more cost effective, which we're still trying to be cost effective. Again, I will reiterate, I'll be the Debbie Downer to say this is year 3 of a 4-year cycle of cuts to get us where we need to be. But that's what I will be watching for, is that those mental health supports, although they may look different, are still what are needed to support students. Because I am, I have to say, I wonder, those mental health counselors that are certified professionals to do that work are very specific to that, and have a level of counseling that they're doing and providing for students, because it's so hard to find mental health counselors for youth in this area. I mean, if you'd like to wait a year, you can get on a wait list. And so I do want to say that that's one concern, that whatever that looks like, I still am hoping that they are still seeing a qualified mental health provider within our school during the school day, and that that's still available.
Yeah, just following up on what you're saying, Director Marlowe, I am strongly against any notion, action, thought of reducing any Swedish mental health counselor FTE. Strongly against it. And in fact, what I would say is I would rather have you explore, how do we actually bill for services for this? If the issue is filling the funding gap, you're in a community that I would just shot in the dark say that 95% of our students have insurance. Overwhelming number of them have private health insurance, which billing for services for mental health in pediatric population is actually quite easy and quite well reimbursed. And so I'd rather see us explore, and I know I don't want us to become a healthcare authority or agency. So within the realm of how do you do it without adding more administrative costs? And I don't know what the administrative burden would be, but that is a much more tenable option for me to bill for services than to reduce access. Because what you just said, Director Marlowe, is hitting on the head. If we reduce access, it will be gone from our community, period. Those won't all of a sudden be displaced and open up a shop somewhere down the road for kids to go to. That would be a far-fetched. So I would argue that we actually need to double down and add more resources and just create a robust process by which there is the billing for services. Because I can't support anything that reduces access to Swedish mental health counselors. That was a specific levy funded, supported, huge part about why we had such wide success when we did that now 6-7 years ago.
Well, along that line, I mean, can you say anything more about what you mean by restructuring of contracted mental health services?
We have probably a lot more work to do. So the additions are not as robust, right, in our work. And we are also continuing to work through conversations with the board on the strategic plan. So our hope is that we actually just engage in a partnership and conversation with our different providers, although it is primarily Swedish Medical, but there are other providers that are coming to us as well. And how do we consider all of that? And I mean, Swedish Medical has also had a hard time filling some of the positions too. So how do we just have to engage in that conversation? So there might be different ways we can restructure it and serve as a way to not reduce service, but think differently. And that's another important idea about the billing work. So I think that's noted by Martin. I saw him writing it down. And I appreciate sort of that as an example to pull forward and to talk about.
No, actually, I do have something to say, but I didn't realize I was on. Sorry. I'm just circling back to the, we have 61 confirmed retirements, resignations so far, so we don't feel that there's any need for a RIF, which is great news, but are we confident that those, you know, it's always like, are the right people resigning, retiring? Are we going to have any needs that cause us to hire? Or are we comfortable that those numbers are going to have us in the right place, that we're not going to, you know, if all your retirements are math teachers, then you have a problem. Are we confident that we're in the right place with that?
You know, I don't know if Donna wants to jump up.
It
looks like she's running.
Yeah, we are confident, but Donna can certainly, Donna Hood can share more details, but we are confident. But that's a great question. We don't want to lose all of our math teachers in the system.
And thank goodness I do not have a giant stack of math teachers resigning in my office anywhere. So Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Donna Hood, and that is true. There's no crystal ball by which I can for sure say we're going to have exact matches of those things. But generally speaking, that number is really good. And our IEA president, I have to give her credit for supporting us here with some messaging around this. We find people don't always understand quite how simple it is to submit that information to HR. And so she did some work on her side to help us with that. And we think we're getting some earlier notifications for people who know what their plans are. And we're very, very grateful for that. So anybody else out there who has yet to let HR know, please do. And we're compiling all that information right now. I think we expect probably to see another 50 to 60. That would not surprise me. In any sort of given year, even when there is sort of not growth, it's pretty common to hire about 100 teachers. And I've sort of checked my thinking as I've been out at recruiting fairs and talked with some of the district leaders who are similarly sized to us, and that's about the same for them as well. So I do think there will be hiring. Particularly, we are focused on special ed hiring. It's just a critically important area and hard to find. So we have had some success already in our local recruiting efforts, and we're very happy about that. But no, I can't say for sure everything is going to math out perfectly today, but we are watching it and making then common sense adjustments as we go.
Thank you. Yeah.
It'd be great if there could be some acknowledgement through short communication from either Donna and Drana or Superintendent and Drana to thank IEA members for doing that early conversation, because the stress that it just dials down in the district climate about the worry about what a reduction in force is and that impact would be really important. And I think help reinforce for why that early, like you're not asking to, you know, it's really to make this conversation easier at this point in the year.
And we may still be in the middle of it, but where are we with the K registration and how those numbers are coming in for enrollment?
Yeah, great question. So we have just gotten, I've just gotten a good amount of information from our student information systems team. I've asked for comparison data, so I'm waiting currently to get the comparisons. So I know if where we're at this year compares to a certain level, and so I can use that to, revise projections. So I don't have that yet, but I have
Maybe
asked
next
for it and
time,
I'm waiting for it.
in a
Yeah.
couple weeks at our next meeting. That would be a great update. Because it's a very telling sign. And I know, registration may be at a certain level at this time in the year, and then it tends to come up because additionals come in, but it would be good to know. So great, thank you.
When you gave these updated enrollment numbers, or you talked, I heard you as I was driving back here, which I apologize that I was gone for the cookie concert. Does that include IT? Does that include TK?
I believe, yes, that should include them in the count.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just so everyone's aware that might then artificially, like, yes, we have a bump in enrollment in the springtime, but that's 48 kids of transitional K that didn't start until January. So if there's 200 plus, then that's, I just want to make sure that we have that awareness, because that's a new thing for our school district. Then expect or be surprised by that every year in the winter. It
Right,
happens.
because that'll always be a mid-year bump, right? Because the transitional kindergarten doesn't start until like January or in that time frame. Yeah.
So, just for me, I want to express my gratitude for this continual process. I know it is harder to try to do this earlier and to go through all the conversations at the level of depth we've been pressing for, but I think it's also been very helpful to get feedback, to get input, to have the session to bring in public input. And so I just want to appreciate the additional level of work that is meant in a compressed period of time. I think, though, it pays off because it does release some of the pressure on getting to a final budget answer before some of those other unknowns come in. So I look forward to us continuing to get updates as more of those unknowns become known along the way. Was there another comment? There's movement in the room.
Good evening, Susan Mundell, Executive Director of Elementary Ed. I just wanted to clarify that the kindergarten registration numbers at this point do not include ITK. That's a separate registration process and isn't taking place just yet. So when the kindergarten numbers come in, it'll be straight kindergarten, and we'll get the ITK numbers later.
Thank you. Any final comments?
Yes, I have a question.
Oh,
So I think one of the challenges, I'll first comment, then question, of the iterative process that George Moore mentioned is then sometimes I think they do miss gaps in the conversation, meaning like one of the proposals the district said is, well, what if we turn the dial and increase class sizes? That's how we could do some money saving. And we were like, no. So I do want the community to know and staff to know lots of proposals were provided to us before it got to what you have given us as a summation. So there's been lots of things that have been like thrown against the wall and see what is stuck, just so the community knows it isn't just like, oh, we just got to this and now we're all like happy go lucky. That's not actually how it went. At that retreat, I did ask a specific question on how much we spend on supplemental contracts and how that compares to our colleague districts around us. Because I think there's something structurally different about our compensation for why we have different challenges in, let's say, the Lake Washington School District, which has very similar demographics. So from a pure apportionment standpoint from the state, the formula funding would fund us very similarly to Lake Washington, but yet have a very different impact from an employment standpoint. So you may not have that information tonight, but just, I still do believe that's an important piece of information for us to know structurally long-term, what that potential impact is and how we may be similar or different than Lake Washington and Bellevue, and will inform the board for just knowledge now and future conversations with our bargaining units.
Good to note that.
I think that's an interesting question, and it also reminds me how different our contracts are in Lake Washington. They certainly put a lot more money towards the last 5 years. In fact, theirs is extended. They have a whole another bracket that we don't have for 20 to 25 years, where we put a lot more money, I think, into the front end of our newer teachers, just because trying to move here, be on your own. Many of them are still single, living in an apartment with 3 other people to afford to live. So I appreciate that model. And so that piece might be a little different in how we compensate differently between the districts, but to what level as far as what we're doing for the contract services. What I was interested in knowing at some point is our staffing levels in the classroom. So classroom staff, not just overall, oh, we have this many certificated staff, but staff room compared to what the prototypical school model would say. So it might be, in an elementary school, the prototypical school model says for your number of students, you should have one music teacher, and we might have a 1.5. So how are we staffing above what the prototypical school model is? Because that's a conversation we would like to have back with our legislators, saying this is what you're telling us we should have in our district. And this is what we have prioritized as a district to have, or based on, our taxpayers, our community has funded whatever that addition is. So it would be interesting to know what we're doing above the prototypical school model.
So I'll just repeat because I think I heard it, but I want to make sure. So it's very simply our staffing versus what the prototypical model has for staffing in a comparison.
Which we gave the breakdown for the support services in our fact sheet, info sheet that we did for legislators, because they enhanced that part of the formula for counselors, psychologists, nurses, but still nowhere near. But instead of funding 6 nurses for the 26 that we staffed, they increased it, but nowhere near even to cover half the costs.
And that's always one of those false things in the sense where the legislature talks about we're going to fund more X, whatever, nurses as an example, but we're already putting that on our own backs to put into our schools. So it doesn't make it an increase for us. It just allows us maybe a little flexibility to do something else with what might have been levy dollars that we had been using to fund nurses in our schools.
Which is, I think, the position we as a district found ourselves in last spring with just what you just brought up is like the message from the legislature was like, hey, we added all this additional funding for all these things. And yet Issaquah is cutting. And it was because to your point, we haven't clearly articulated, there's a formula on what that would translate to. Here's where we're funding at.
Well, and to Director Gallinger's earlier point about the various things that we can consider to reduce budgets and we don't do. We said when we started this process 2-3 years ago that we were cutting budgets before other districts because we didn't get the ESSER funding. But just watch, other districts are going to follow. And now, as you read the various newspapers and news reports, not only are other districts making cuts, but they are increasing class sizes. And some of them are looking at closing schools. And some of them are doing a lot of very dramatic things that, we're certainly not doing this year. Hopefully, we're not doing it all. But, each year we have to look at the situation and we have to say, okay, we still have a shortfall. What do we cut now? And we have, the board has been very thoughtful about this. And the board has looked at some cuts that we've said, yeah, no, we don't like those. And we've looked at some others that, we're not crazy about those either, but at least they're not impacting classrooms. They're not impacting kids to the extent that they could. So I do think that's a really good point to just remember that we are being really thoughtful about this. We are looking at a lot of different things and trying to choose the least painful ones. And we are not alone in this process. And it's actually getting uglier in some other districts. So it's good that we kind of got out ahead of the curve.
Okay.
If I could I mention one thing before we
Please.
end this portion? I wanted to specifically call out Mariah Bassick and Teresa Aarons in our office for the tremendous amount of work that they have done just to get us to tonight. And it's taken a lot and I really appreciate it. And I wanted to recognize that.
No.
Thank you. With that, I think we're ready to move to the next topic. Our next topic is monitoring of EL 10, structure of schools. Do I have a motion?
Sure. I move the board accept the annual internal monitoring report for EL 10 structure of schools as presented.
Second.
Superintendent.
Great, thank you. There were, this was a previously talked about and discussed report. We took some feedback from that conversation and made two changes really to note. And we also have Dr. Dana Bailey on Zoom ready to chime in if there are questions. But essentially, we just clarified and focused on the bell times. I think we were kind of getting a little bit in circular conversation on the difference between bell time versus daily schedules, but it really is the bell time focus. So we just clarified that so we could focus on how that worked its way through in number 3, and really focused on then the examples of how the bell times as have been approved by the board allow for the room at the different levels for a very important topic, which is social emotional well-being. So those were the ways that we made some changes and showed illustrative examples, in addition to obviously the compliance. That's an important thing to make sure we are all meeting the basic minutes, but we are above and beyond that as well, and to the point of the conversation earlier in many ways. So those are the 2 primary changes, and that's what I wanted to share before discussion.
Thanks. Let's see if we have any public input on this topic before we go to discussion. Any public input in the room on the discussion of EL 10 structure of schools? Any on the Zoom? Thank you. Board, thoughts, comments? I did not have any comments either, so we don't have any additional comments on this one.
No, we beat the horse dead already in the first time.
You know, we spent a lot of time on this in the first review. And thank you for making the updates and taking in that feedback. So I think with that, we will move to a vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? No, that it passes. Thank you. With that, we're going to move on to the next area, which is discussion of monitoring EL 16 equity. Do I have a motion?
I move the board accept the annual internal monitoring report for EL 16 equity as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Superintendent, over to you and the team.
Great, thank you. As you see, Elena Sivadasan and Donna Hood are joining up here at the podium as a team. Elena took the lead as the facilitator on behalf of myself and the team to help ensure that we were getting strong input and review process through our entire cross-cabinet team members and others beyond. And with a strong partnership with Donna in particular, because we've dialed through our interpretation, dialed up some of our desire to monitor certain data. And so we really consider, so thank you. Let me pause. Thank you, Elena, Donna, Cabinet. As you can see, there's a commonality here where we're really spending a lot of time together to do this co-owned work. So thank you for all of that. I also want to share that, and acknowledge that 2 of our student representatives gave a lot of input that was very helpful, Nate and Mia. And we really look forward to building upon this work and using this year that we are monitoring the data for, not this current school year, as a baseline for the new data that's being presented in sections 5 and 6. So I will pass it to Elena to frame additional comments as she sees fit versus, walk through the whole entire monitoring report. So thank you.
Good evening, Elena Sivadasan, Executive Director of Equity. I just wanted to call out a few key highlights, echoing what Superintendent Talyik said. I am proud that we are starting to see a more systematization of the equity work where, as you can see in the report, there's a lot of cross-departmental voice and collaboration. Also, proud of the professional development that we are offering that is really based on creating authentic parent partnerships and providing professional development that is asset-based, both in how we view students and in our instructional practices. And then I can't be remiss in just talking about the collaborative and equity-focused work we had around the vaccine clinic, where we were able to provide vaccination for over 2,000 students in collaboration with our community partners and cross-departmental departmental work. So those are some of the key highlights that I just wanted to share from the monitoring report, and look forward to any questions you all have. We'll probably have other colleagues maybe jump up as well, because this work is not just the work of the equity department, but the work of the entire system. So. I felt bad that I didn't introduce Donna. Sorry.
So, thank you for that update. Again, I'll follow my same script. Is there, and do public input before we get to discussion. Is there any public input in the room? Any on the Zoom? Okay, board, questions, comments?
Just get started. Can you tell us about the equity framework for supplemental curriculum and non-adopted materials? Like it was the, hey, you attached the rubric, I read through it, but actually it wasn't, I really want to know so let's say like who completes it, and then does it actually impact whether something can be used or not? Or is it just everyone does it just as an exercise to admire a choice?
Yes, so good question. So the equity framework for supplemental materials really came into play for us to be able to provide guidance to staff around when they're picking supplemental materials, how to do that thoughtfully and to keep an equity lens in mind. One thing that I want to point out is in the IA contract, teachers have full control over the supplemental material that they pick and choose in their classroom. And so the framework is meant to be a guide to help them make a thoughtful professional decision as they are reviewing supplemental material.
So do you have any idea like how often it's been utilized?
I don't have specific data, but we did craft the framework with teachers at both at the elementary, the middle, and high school level to get their feedback to make sure that it was user friendly and would help them as they're picking supplemental material. I have gotten a few emails this year from staff thanking me for the framework and saying that it was helpful to them and easy to use. But I don't have specific data on how many times it's been accessed.
Thanks.
Other comments, questions?
Well, we have continued to get questions around this, so I just thought I would throw it out there around how are we training teachers when it comes to working with students who are using language that is inappropriate, especially racial slurs that we have been hearing from throughout our community and community members talking about. So how are we addressing that? Because the sense is that we're not.
Yeah, so we have created what's called a Courageous Conversations PowerPoint. It's included in this equity monitoring report. And it is required professional development that all staff are required to receive. And really what it talks about is from a staff lens, how do staff respond to racial slurs or microaggressions, bias, a number of things in the classroom or out in the hallways, just providing them scenarios, sentence stems, just professional development for how to respond when that happens. We also have provided resources that teachers can deliver to students around racial slurs, specifically educating students on the harmful impact of racial slurs and why they are inappropriate. So we have a set of resources in that regard too for staff to be able to access.
And how do we know it's working?
So I feel that that's one of the things that I'm in constant communication with our executive directors over the levels as well to talk about how are these resources being used in the building? Are there things that we need to improve on? And so that's sort of the feedback and the process that I go through so that they can help support their administrators, right, who are supporting students and staff in the building around this.
I was just going to say, along that line, are you monitoring the discipline data around the issues of the use of racial slurs when students are not responding to the staff or teachers indicating the inappropriateness of what they're saying?
Yes. So one of the things that we have in place is a plan for how to respond to racist or bias incidents in the building. When that happens, part of the protocol is that I am to be contacted and I work with the executive director of that level and then the administrator, depending on the building that it's in. And as part of that process, we put together a reteaching plan for the student. And there's also data, right, that's collected around that type of discipline. And that data is monitored. It's part of the reason why we created the Power of Language professional development that went out to students. And also in my instance, in the time that I have been involved in these situations, I have not had a repeat offense where I've been called in to work with a student more than once to re-educate and retrain.
I would add that I do think we know we need to do more. So your question on impact, we do hear continued instances where people are not feeling or they're citing examples, and we heard that today from our students. But it is, and during public comment, so I believe we do need to do more, and that is part of also some of the investment proposals for the strategic plan to enhance our ability to foster skills around cross-cultural competence, and both on a proactive but also a reactive side for all staff.
Yes, I thank you for saying that, Superintendent Talyik. Sometimes I'm focused on we're monitoring in the review and not on what we're doing currently or in the future. But yes, I'm currently working with the executive directors at the levels to talk about potential curriculum that we could put in place K-12 for addressing incidents such as this with students, just trying to be more proactive and how we are educating students around not just racial slurs and microaggressions, but around identity and culture. And so we are in conversations with that. We're looking to partner potentially with some outside agencies around some curriculum that we could put in place to help proactively start to teach our students K-12 about these topics.
So I guess it's probably worth saying here, one of the challenges with monitoring, right, is that we're monitoring a year ago. And by design, we're not talking about the current, to your point, the current state or what's going forward. So I'll just, I guess, maybe put on the table that this is a topic that came up during our retreat as one of the things of how can we, what is the feedback on this topic? What are we doing about this topic? And I know one of the things that has come up consistently is around a want of knowing what the actual discipline taken is in any situation. And so I will just share my comments at that time as a restatement. So I think one of the things important in our current work and our going forward work is that we're more clear. I think we've absolutely done statements that state our general principles, what we believe in at middle and high. Those have gone out, they've gone out full community. If folks are not aware of those have gone out this year, you can see those. But going forward, I think there's an opportunity to be more clear on what are the consequences of these behaviors and try to decouple that from what are the consequences in specific situations where there may be privacy concerns about individual student names at the time. Today, those two get coupled. And when someone asks, well, what happens? The response can often be unsatisfying because it comes along with there's a privacy around a specific situation. I think our opportunity is that we get more clear in sharing what happens, what is re-education, what happens on multiple offense, who is accountable for engaging, and how do those things get reviewed, and making that more clear so that when hopefully we have less of these instances occurring, but when they do occur, we can point back to what is our statement of principle, right, which we've published, but also back that up with what is our practice in consequence, et cetera. So I think we're getting a bit stronger on making clarity of our beliefs, but that bit about what is the actual consequence is still pretty unsatisfying to folks because of that link to the privacy of an individual situation.
Thank you and noted.
I unfortunately realized I've been doing all this unconnected to the internet because I had all these notes I wanted to bring up about this topic that I don't have, but I remember one, so I would like to raise it because I have to do all this before the meeting. So as I remember in my thoughtful review that I made notes on earlier, I guess one of the things that occurred to me as we were thinking about some of these equity choices, and I'll use the example you bring up about, I'll say companion material. That's not the term you used for the additional material.
Oh, supplemental.
Supplemental material, and making sure that there's good representation. I actually am very curious about if and or how we do that in things like activities and clubs and sports. My example would be, how do we bring in Society of Black Engineers to work with our robotics club so that there's more connections made of diverse professionals who do the roles with our students who do the projects, or, there's national societies of accountants, Hispanic accountants, and try to infuse that more, like you're saying with the supplemental materials. How can we make some of these activities or other exposure points broaden the touch points to other folks who I don't think we traditionally connect with in our schools? And so I very much am on how are we building up our opportunities and examples of leadership of our traditionally underrepresented communities. I think we're doing a lot on maybe supports systems, but less on those leadership side of it. And so I know that was one of my notes that had a very good point in the list I've lost. But I don't know if we do that today or if we can, but that's something I definitely would like to explore as we go forward.
I definitely think it's something that we can explore. I mean, we have many models of ways that we're already doing this in other regards, like when we do symposium or things like that. So we definitely can do this with clubs and activities. This is something that I could partner with the executive directors of high school, Andrea's year around, and also at the middle school level. And noted.
Other comments?
Sure. I have a few, but it's probably for our finance team. So the link about the 2021 lab title business building allocation. So I don't know if that can be pulled up. What is the column that's factor that's in red? And some of the choices are 0.50, 0.30, 0.20, 0.250, 0.25, 0.15. Is that a state, local? Well, what is that? So it's this, you open up the lab thing and then it, that's why I asked if Stephen could get to that, that would be helpful. So
It's on the monitoring report, Stephen. It's at the top of page 6. There's a link. If you want to show him, yep.
So I'm just like, what column does that mean? What does that factor mean? Someone from finance.
I think they're pulling it up first, and I hope everyone's having seamless technical connection to Wi-Fi.
I'm not gonna get it, guys. We got pretty far before.
Which column were you asking about now that I brought it up myself so I can look at it?
The factor column, so it's the second part of the table. Where the first couple columns are in blue and then the fourth column's red, all the red numbers, like what is that? Just because I don't recall seeing that. And I just want to know.
Is that the percent of free and reduced lunch at each school?
No,
Because
because
it
we have
doesn't
no,
look like it.
no, because that's already up. That's the green column, the third column on the top.
So I will say that our team here is acquiring this for the first time, and we will be developing this for the next year. And determining the factor and the impetus for that factor is something that we'll have on our list to try to understand a little bit better for you.
Because this was built with last year's budget.
Right.
You didn't create
I
it.
don't have that answer right now.
Okay, can you at least then walk me through the bottom yellow, bright yellow table? That one. Oh. And if again you can't, that's also okay. I'm not
I
trying.
believe that is a year-to-year difference in how that was staffed for those schools.
Right. So I guess I mean, so because, and this may be a combination of you and Donna, because this was done in arrears, so this truly would be for like what it was projected for this year. So is that staffing truly what we're at this year for those buildings? If that.
Right. Yes, my colleagues.
My question and concern is like, our areas as need, we're decreasing services to. So I want to actually find out, is that really something that's happening?
Rich may actually be reading my mind right now. My colleagues in TLS support the title and lab staffing building over building. And so he might have a few more details about that. I believe that we are currently staffed the way that we expected to be. I don't know if you recall any particular changes.
Yeah, no, I just that the title funding didn't provide as much staff. So we had to reduce 0.5 somewhere. And this was the way that our business office helped us to kind of sort through the various factors of achievement and poverty index. And but yes, this I do believe reflects our current staffing. The 14.5 there on the left is where we are currently staffed at this time.
So for clarity, did the funding go down or did they not fund us enough for us to cover increases that we had? I know, I'm asking questions now.
Yeah. That gets beyond.
Well, it might also be related to the decline in enrollment.
The money did
right?
not.
Right,
the
so-
Right,
money
so
did
we had
not
to-
cover 15 FTE. It covered 14.5 FTE is what.
Right. And it might be related to the decline in enrollment, which drove less funding. They only funded so many people.
It's a federally driven formula and it's not uncomplicated. So it might be that Martin and Mariah need a minute to fully answer that question. It could absolutely be as simple as enrollment, but I can't say for sure.
And I might be fine with the cost no longer covered 15 FTE.
Right, because the FTE also cost more.
Not,
Yeah.
not that, we didn't see as much of a need in that. So that's the difference in perception. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm okay with say, hey, we'll get back to you with the answer. That's also fair. So that's a part about the arrears when the teams have changed. just
Right.
because
Fully changed.
I totally get that. Were other board members able to open the chronic absenteeism file? Because I was never able to open that. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that I didn't have permission.
Right. So
Yes.
I would just request that when the monitoring reports are built, that they don't have links that we can't open.
Right, it's on the middle of page 6. And I didn't know if is because I wasn't in this building, but to your point, it has to be accessible to everybody, even if
we
they're
will-
not on the district.
I see that it's not accessible to
Yeah.
people, so we will change that and update that.
Yes, we just send that out to us separately.
Yes, absolutely.
I assumed it was just me because the tech issues I have with these
It-
computers.
it's- no,
That's what I was just double checking.
Affirm that that's not just you.
And then my last comment, sorry, I should say that. Another comment I have.
My next.
Yeah, my next comment. So in number 4, specifically, when you talk about developing and implement strategies for effective partnerships and seeking out diverse perspectives.
Where are you?
Number 4.
Page 8.
Thank you.
Yep. Page 8. Under evidence. Bullet 3. In spring 2022.
Yes.
So my preference for evidence would be less just a laundry list of what was done and more talking about what your analytical belief is the impact of that. So I'll just ask it for you here then. I think when I think of equity and the equity work that really needs to happen in our district, yes, racial equity, super important. One of my first early learnings was from Director Moraldo on that, and I've carried that flag through WASDA and whatnot on your behalf. But I don't want to lose sight of, for me, equity, particularly in the Issaquah School District, is our special education services, where I really feel that if we were to poll our community, even probably our staff, they would say, hey, we need to do more, we need to do better. And so I'm glad that there is outreach. I really want to know, what is that actually translating to? So I'd rather hear what did you hear and what did you hear the gaps were? Not like, hey, we had 5 meetings. So I'd be curious to know, what did you hear and what are you going to do differently because of what you heard? Does that make sense? That's what would be really helpful. So that's why I just ask you here, what did you hear and what are we going to do differently to actually pivot, change, and improve our practice?
Yes, so I will do my best to speak to this. It was really a partnership between Lorna Gilmore and Special Services. And so there might be someone from Special Services that can speak more to this, but just to give some background information, Lorna did a parent panel at Grand Ridge Elementary and helped facilitate this. And this parent panel was focused on specifically on special education. So there were parents who who did not grow up in the US school system, but whose students may be receiving special education services. They were coming to Grand Ridge talking about what their experiences were with special education, and that that panel had been powerful enough that it led to a collaboration between the equity department and special services, where we were supporting the special services department in at first simply having a listening session to hear from our culturally diverse families about their experiences with special education. And so just facilitating those listening sessions in different languages and hearing from them to help make changes or to inform some of our practices in our special services department. Those specific key takeaways or maybe changes that were made, I would have to defer to the special education department, and that might be something that we have to get back to you with outside of tonight.
We definitely need to get back because I believe it was Jameson who was the partner on that one, and he's not here to speak directly, and that would be, we can follow up on that.
Yeah, and so just looking ahead to the next year, I think it'd be great actually to not just talk about like, oh, we had these listening sessions. Like, it's what did you hear is what we really want to know, and what did you going to do about it? I will continue to elevate my complaint that we have a highly capable parent engagement group that has meetings with whoever our person is, according to highly capable program manager district. We don't have the same thing for special services parents, and that seems hugely inequitable.
Thank you for noting that. We have different combinations of folks meeting, but I think not in the same structure potentially. So we will continue to look more into that and figure out how to create more parity there, to your point.
Yeah, I think especially now that there's a dedicated special education PTSA that you can connect with, they're very active. I see them meeting all the time. So I think there's going to be more room for that you probably are already doing, but again, the parity.
Thank you. Yeah, there are several committees, but they might be more topical versus, we will look into that, but we are meeting with them on a regular basis, as well as the special education direct leads for the PTSA at large.
Okay. My question was going to be that it seems the nut we can't crack around our highly capable programs. And I loved the laundry list of ways we are trying to address it. And I just don't know. So I don't expect an answer, but is there thought around why is it that we still, and especially the numbers were the overall highly capable? I'd really like to know, because we have a self-contained program having information to that self-contained as far as especially around the racial inequities within that system. I don't know. I think we have been the most progressive with what we have allowed. We've done it for decades, and we cannot seem to get our numbers anywhere near where they should be, especially at the elementary level of those either the pull-out services that are separate, the SAGE program and the Merlin program. What is our racial makeup in that? Because it was this way 12 years ago. The last time I think I saw data around how many students of color in each of those programs specifically called out was. And I know that we've had staff go to seminars. There's the Robinson School of at the UW that is really trying to get around this. It's a national problem, and it just seems to be there's no movement on it. And so I don't know, what is it we're truly evaluating? And I will go back to something I've always said. We do not have a highly gifted program. We have a highly capable program. We have a highly productive program. And is that what it really is? And should we start really referring to it more appropriately? Because it's about the kids that can do work quickly. So it's not just that they understand or they think in a very gifted and different, talented way. It's about they can get in there, they can get their work done and get to the next thing and learn that quickly, get to the next thing, but that they're able to produce work. Because I can tell you one I don't see is the number of special ed students in our highly capable program. Because having had one kicked out of our highly capable program, I know that it's difficult to service special needs students in the highly capable program. And they really don't get a chance until you start to see the numbers change in the high schools when they get to pick themselves whether or not they're going to go for an honors or AP class.
But along that line with the numbers we see for the representation in the highly capable, that doesn't pick up students in high school that just choose to take AP classes. They have to actually be designated as highly capable through a process. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I did remember one of my other thoughts. And that I just wanted to note is looking at the very end of the reports. This is page 12. And we talk a lot about our hiring and our hiring mix. But if I'm reading this correctly, we've actually made pretty significant shift in our diverse hiring over these 3 sets of years that are here. And so I'm not, like, we keep talking about it, but I don't know that we're taking credit for this kind of movement to go from in 2018 at 8% certified staff of color, or am I classified? Sorry, I'm reading the other side to try to get the same benchmark. Nope. It's bigger.
Yeah,
I know, I can't
is
see.
that the one that's 10.5?
Yeah, you're
About 2% increase.
8.8 to 10.52.
Yeah. And then up into the current year. So I was at least pleasantly surprised to see that the number had moved. And I don't know that I'd heard us speak in that way that aligned to these numbers. So that was good.
Is it possible to get more granularity though in what the POC really means? Because it would be nice to know what areas we're actually moving in, because there may be some that we're not moving.
For sure.
We did have some conversation about that. There were
That's
a
true.
couple of groups where the numbers were so small that we were a little concerned about inadvertently identifying a staff person who might not want that to occur. But we are absolutely happy to keep monitoring at that very granular level within HR for sure, and internally. And certainly I'll keep talking with our superintendent about when and what to share versus, of course, staff privacy, and just want to be careful about that.
I was presuming that was why it was
Yeah.
listed as that. Probably just like you have the disclaimer language in our academic reporting, having that in there for why it's that way, because it does veer from our standard reporting structure would be helpful. I assume that's why you did it,
Yep.
but our public may not.
Certainly, yeah, we can add that.
So I will say, I mean, I'll add this, and Donna should feel free to chime in, and certainly the conversations that Donna and Elena and I've had along the way as we were reflecting on the data. We haven't looked at this data in this way, so it was yet to be celebrated. But also what might have actually happened during that time. We've sort of started to go back into that, but we also know this is an increased area of opportunity for us as well. Donna, if you'd like to share anything else about how you went through this process, if there's anything you want to add, that would be great.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been really exciting as an HR team talking about this, I feel like the group has really rallied around the goal and figuring out where are we so that we can monitor forward progress. We are really excited about some of the changes we're making to recruiting practices, because we do think we can bring our hiring managers more diverse candidate pools. It's not going to be easy, but we are excited to really work hard at that to see what we can do to improve outcomes. I've been delighted too in our recruiting events to see how many candidates we are talking to when we say we believe representation matters, that they are leaning into that conversation and so eager to be where students are who look like them. So it's been a really fun conversation with potential candidates at every one of these events, particularly Central, just very recently. And I realize this is current, not a year in arrears, but lots of bilingual candidates, and not not just one language, several, and lots of folks who identified as Latinx and just a lot of potential out there. So we are working hard to get some of those folks into our candidate pools and let hiring teams take a look at them.
Similar to how you added the summary sort of results or students' thoughts from the middle school. I don't know what you guys called it. It was the Rashad Norris and Michael Tuncap for relevant engagement work, and that student feedback was really powerful. That would be something that for me, I think would be really helpful to see for in number 6, where the first bullet of evidence for the educators of color cohort meetings. It's really, again, it's less about like, oh yes, we had 4 meetings. It's more, so what did you hear? Right. So what are their challenges that they're facing? What are the things they feel like we're improving on or not improving on? Because I'm sure you guys are talking about that, but that's actually what we want to know. And that's how we'll get a sense over time on, there's, gosh, for several years, we talked about how there's not enough, or we're missing this, or we feel we aren't supported in this way. And then as you do more intervention stuff, which the superintendent talked about as far as the priority area for cross-cultural training and all of that work, that we see less of this even amongst staff. So we're not asking for you to make like big reports or Excel sheets just for us, but it's just something you're already capturing. It would be great to give us a snapshot for it. And unless it still will be qualitative information, but I think more meaningful than saying, oh, we had 4 meetings.
Absolutely noted. And one of the things, right, that came out of those meetings, right, was the need to have a mentor program that was specifically a BIPOC mentor program within our district. And so that's one of the things that has been negotiated in just the current contract for this year, but noted that those are things that we could capture that are coming out of those spaces and listening to our staff.
Yes.
And one thing just to add on there too, we are sponsoring about 11 educators going out to an educator of color leadership community. And I think what's been nice for them is it's not ours. We aren't the hosts per se. So there's a safe space and they're meeting people across districts and from other communities and are able to share and I think really be with people having similar experiences. So I'm excited to learn when that's kind of wrapped up from that group that we've sent out. How did it go? What kinds of recommendations would you make for who we send in the future? And we have a 3-year commitment to supporting that work. So I'm excited to see how that group then also helps us to build even more mentorship within the district.
Since we're talking about this, I will add that there are times when some affinity spaces wish to keep their discussion closed. But I don't believe that's necessarily the case here, but I do want to acknowledge that it's an important value for what we call affinity, but also caucus spaces. And we also are having an opportunity to send our executive team members to a Puget Sound ESD space. And so I believe several of our cabinet members will be participating in that as well, to have affinity with our cabinet and other executive leaders across other districts as well. So I think we will hopefully continue to support, well, we will continue to support that. We already are. The other final comment that will come up for next year's report as a preview is, in partnership with the IEA, we developed a equity advisory committee where they are taking more of a, it's a very representative group across, an equal group across our IEA members, as well as our team members here at the district office, to discuss specific areas of interest. And they will be coming up with ideas, suggestions, and concrete ways to improve our work. So Elena's working in partnership as a co-lead with Sharon Roy. That happens to be also a direct connection to the team work that they have day to day, but they're co-leading that space, and that was part of our contract this year. Elena, if you want to add anything to that, that would be helpful as a preview, but we haven't talked about that as much, and it would be something certainly that we'll be adding more insight into, but also sharing with the board throughout the process this spring.
Yes, I think just a couple of things that I would add is it is a nice partnership between IEA and the district office. It also allows for leadership opportunities and staff feeling like their voice is being heard in some of the equity work that we are doing across the district. And just making sure, right, that at the district office, we're not in our own echo chamber, but that we are working with staff, right, that are boots on the ground and what they're seeing in their buildings. And what are things that are going really well, but what are some pain points, right, that we need to address. And so just having that insight will be very valuable in that partnership in the work.
I just have a couple more things because I know we're wrapping up here, and definitely not things that I want to change in the report, but things I want us to be mindful of. And it's an email that I think I received, and I think maybe Harlan received, from a student who feels a part of a group that's not welcomed in his school. And that is because he does not have the same political views as many of his classmates. And in a district where, when you look politically at our elections, 75% vote for one party, what it's like to be part of that other 25%. And we heard this even with the student sessions. I've heard this before. And they said it's less from the teachers and more from the other students that aren't allowing them to have a voice. So I think the lesson and learning is really about being able to respect differences of perspective and opinion, and how do we create that in our students? Because I can tell you that if you go online, you certainly don't see any respect for people that don't align politically on either side of the aisle. How can we change that by the work that we're doing in our schools to teach our kids, yes, this behavior that has evolved, especially over the past 10 years of intense internet use by everybody, how do we start to have better conversations and be respectful? And I think the other area, and I guess I'm doing this much too, 12 years ago we can't stop talking about race because it is important to go, well, on the other end, we live in the least religious county in the nation. 3% of people go to any church, synagogue, or mosque or temple. So when we talk about also protection of students and making them feel welcome, we're talking, that's a very small set of students who have religious beliefs that are not welcomed by so many around them, not appreciated. And that includes Christianity, which I think stuns people our age, because if you were to ask us, we all probably grew up in a very Christianized environment, but that our children aren't, so that their views, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or even Christian, aren't really known and understood by their peers. And they feel very silenced by that. So it's a thought. It's not that, oh, we need to change something and what are we going to fundamentally do? But it's a reminder that there are other pieces to feeling welcoming that I think are important for us to begin considering in our work.
Thank you for saying that. The one piece I wanted to share is that Rosetta Lee has done work with our staff on what you're talking about in terms of how do we help students not be so polarized when we live in a nation that is very polarized, at least currently. And so she has talked a lot about helping students understand, right, the difference between a debate and a discussion. And that often also when we are talking about topics that maybe students don't have background information on or a lived experience with, we have to be careful that we're not taking students out of the learning zone and putting them in the performance zone to try to have these like robust discussions about something that they are not prepared to have a discussion about, which then leads often to a debate versus a discussion or being polarized. And so we do think that that is work that our staff can help our students with. And that is some of the work that Rosetta has done. She's a fabulous presenter with all your spare time. Look at her videos that are in there because she does a beautiful job talking about that.
and this will be my final comment about this, but number two, for to collect, disaggregate, analyze, and utilize data to, in order to identify inequities, and you link to EL12 discipline. I mean, I think there should be some linkage to our academic data because of EL12, EL16, that's why we look at our academic data the way we do now. And so even if it linked to how we do our SIP report, like that structure and the call outs with Washington's student improve, whatever the WSIF, any of that work would probably be helpful just to cross-reference that, because that is how we look at data is differently because of EL16. And so discipline's in there and absenteeism is in there. So having our academic reference in there would be probably helpful.
Noted.
With that, I think we've had some good discussion. We have a motion on the floor. I'll move to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Nope. With that passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have legislative matters. I will turn it to you, Dr. Gallagher.
So one of the things that came out of our day on the Hill was a lot of information on special education funding. There is a concerted effort and alignment amongst all the alphabet soup of education advocacy organizations, including WEA, which is what's really important and powerful. There was a joint statement that was made by all of these agencies as the legislative session got into full swing. And what we would like to now focus the conversation on is Senate Bill 5311. And that one is one that changes the multiplier from 1 to 1.12. So it essentially increased the special education funding multiplier by 12%. The House version is much less than that. The difference between the Senate and House bill also is that the Senate bill has a cap of 15%, which wouldn't impact Issaquah, but would impact other school districts, versus the House has no cap. That being said, the Senate bill drives more money into special education funding statewide than the House bill does in its first year. It has now been passed, unanimously by the Senate floor, which since we were there, we got to see like things don't pass unanimously. So that's why we thought that would be an important one, because it had early bipartisan support by Senator Braun from Southwest Washington. So we really want to help them push this one through the House. And so I hosted the large caucus meeting, which was deferred from legislative conference this morning. And one of the things that we're going to do is educate the 7 ranking members on the House Appropriations Committee and focus their attention on why this is really important for their legislative districts. But in that work, most of them are actually from right in this area. So 5 of the 7 are all districts that are in King County, actually. So it's Representatives Ormsby, Bergquist, Gregerson, Macri, Stokesbury, Chambers, Corey. And so we're enlisting WASD as help for the 2 that are not on this side of the mountains, but the rest are actually all, not only in Western Washington, they're all like right here. And so one of the things that we need to focus our district's attention on, and anyone school parents that are listening, is on Representative Bergquist as the vice chair for the House Appropriations Committee, to have him fully appreciate what the impact is to the 11th legislative district, which does include our students, is going to be something that's very helpful. So that's the work that we will continue to do. We will have the next large schools caucus, again, focusing on special education funding advocacy. And we're kind of on a 2 to 3 week cadence until the session ends. That's going to be on March 29th, which is when we, same day we are having our regional meeting at Shoreline. So So as you may recall, there's 2 meetings in the spring. So one is on Shoreline and then one is in Auburn. And through our dialogue and conversations with our local legislators, which is helpful, I get text back from Senator Wellman, who said, this is how you can help. Specifically reach out to these people and help them understand why it's important. So she's asked us for help, so we will do our part to help in the ways that we can.
Thank you. Anything else anyone else wanted to add? Okay, thank you. With that, we will move on to announcements and correspondence. I know they've been included in the agenda. Anything else anyone wanted to share at this time? Thank you. With that, we'll move to calendar and future agenda topics. I don't believe we have anything on the list we need to.
Just the March 29th meeting with WASDA. So I can sign anyone up who plans to go.
Okay.
So just let me know if you're planning on going and I'll get you registered.
Perfect. Thank you, Diane.
Did you want to try to schedule the prospective board information session, or were you gonna wait till the end of the month?
We're gonna wait till the end.
Okay.
Okay, and
Can I get a sense then, who plans on going to the one in Shoreline versus the one in Auburn? I'm just curious.
I can't go to either one.
When is the one in Auburn?
Oh. Shoreline.
then.
Yeah.
Okay. I should be able to do the 29th.
Yeah, Ann tells me I can't do the other one, so apparently I can do the 29th.
Yeah.
She knows my
We're-
calendar
yeah.
better than I do.
When is the other one? I'm sorry, that's why I can't find the other one date.
The other
April-
one is on April 18th,
April
is
18th.
what I had written down.
Right, that was I think that was in.
Right, and I can't do it either. That's
Right.
why.
Gotcha.
And
Okay,
there's
29th
There's a known
is.
conflict on that one.
Yeah, there's two,
Yeah.
there's 2 of us in King County that are WASDA board representatives, so. Our next door neighbor will be doing that one.
April 18th is the one I can go to. So maybe I'll show up.
You can go to that one.
Okay.
I know the 29th of March, I will be headed towards Orlando, so.
Me too.
I think the board I think 4 of the 5 board members might have a conflict with the 18th,
Right.
Yes.
but I don't.
Oh.
What's not on my calendar?
I picked the 29th.
there's-
Oh,
there's
you know what?
the
Because it's
ASBA.
not on my calendar.
Is that something we should have done?
San Diego. Yeah.
Mercy.
So
No,
I think then the question is the person that is not going to the ASU GSV conference, would that person entertain going to the April 18th one? Is that the direct question? Or do
Oh, I
do
thought
we
we
need
just do
representation?
one. Do I?
Oh, we
need
just
someone
pick
to
one.
do that?
Oh, yeah. Do we need somebody to go to both of them? It's the same thing.
No, it's the
from
same
the
content. No,
WASDA part.
yeah, no, you don't have, and it's
Okay.
optional. I was
Yeah.
just curious to know.
Right.
I'm just getting a sense on
Sydney, will
who's
you go
going.
to that date?
And the reason why is
29th.
because then I'm trying to see if we're gonna mobilize students to go to like how that all works. Because that's what I'm really trying, that's the question we're actually asking is sort of.
Okay, the best one for that would be then the 29th,
March
right?
29th.
Because then our.
Yeah, we're only gonna do it on
Yes,
the, yeah,
got it.
because of,
Okay,
I'm not gonna be at the.
29th it is, wherever Shoreline is.
And then,
Glad that became clear. That's okay.
It's on my calendar now.
and then did we decide for the March 23rd meeting that we're starting at 4 for our work study?
We
We-
did, we calendared.
Do we need
today.
to have a motion about changing that start time for the work study or no?
It's not necessary
Okay.
because you've already got a board meeting scheduled.
A regular,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good work. Hearing no other topics. Use the calendar.
Oh, yeah.
We're adjourned.
All right, good job.